We will get the meeting started with pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're going to start with public audience, and Peggy Shanks, I believe, wanted to speak, so if you would start us off. Oh, and just as we go into this, I found that only last week that a number of commissions or boards do actually have two public audiences, which I was unaware of.
We do.
Yeah, until last, yeah, I didn't know you actually had one till last week. So we are going to have that. We will have a second public audience at the end if any of the members want to speak. And if you could try in general to limit remarks to about 5 minutes or so, I'd appreciate it. Okay, great. Ms.
Thank
Shanks,
you,
please.
Mr. Chairman. Do you need my name for the record? It's Peggy Shanks, and it's listed as Margaret Shanks on the voter registration, and I'm at 2 Briarwood Drive.
Thank you.
And I thank you very much for your service on the Charter Commission. On the handout I gave you, I left off the fact that I was on 2 charter commissions. The first one in 1979, which was right after the charter had been adopted, was the first time we did a review. And then later, sometime in the 90s, and we met in this room at that time. But when I think of the service on a charter commission, it takes me to that one little vignette in David McCullough's book on John Adams. In John Adams, it is mentioned in this book, got on his horse in Quincy with one of his faithful companions, also on horseback, and they rode in the winter from Quincy, Mass. To Philadelphia. Now, you know, any one of us hates to drive to Philadelphia in a car today, but he did that to work on the Constitution and all the other things they did in Philadelphia. So whenever, during my 10 years of office as first selectman, I didn't know that story until I read the book, and I thought, boy, that would have helped me a lot some of those days to have known that. And as you go through your deliberations, just think that it is a tough job, and I think the Charter Commission is one of the most challenging things we all face when we're trying to work with making this government what we want it to be and responsive to the people. I support the decisions I've read about in the paper that you've made, keeping planning and zoning separate, and the Board of Education as it's currently structured, I'm 100% behind that with no term limits. And then whatever form of government we come up with, I really hope we have a Board of Finance in there working to keep that balance in the whole milieu so that we do have that kind of checks and balance we're used to. I am recommending a town manager for the form of government for the town. And this is a very difficult decision for me because I have a long history of support of the current form of government and have not only at charter commissions, but whenever the question has come up, strongly supported it. But as I look at the world today, the federal government is in chaos. We have some kind of a robust, some kind of an economic improvement, but it is not robust. The state is, I've cleaned up my language, but it is going in the wrong direction. Businesses are leaving, and that does definitely affect our ability to fill the empty buildings and the vacant spaces we have here. The only gift we seem to have gotten in the last decade is apartments. Not exactly my favorite place. To see us do that without understanding the kinds of things that will bring upon us, like the heavier demand for secondary services that comes with a more dense population. But I'd like to go over, I know that people have come before you and said, gee, that form of government, we have the farms, we have this, we have that. There is no perfect form of government. From my experience in dealing with, say, CROG, where you have mayors and first selectmen and town managers, everyone has a bump in the road on some of the projects. Let's take a look at the farms. Well-intended people brought that to us, and they said, we don't need a great big ice rink there. We'll make it smaller. So they made it smaller. And then we found out that the hockey team couldn't play there if they were going to be able to compete with kids who practiced on a regular team size, the regulation hockey fit. So they had to rent space to do that for years. And then finally we expanded it. That was sort of the theory of unintended consequences. But the rumor I heard years ago from someone who's no longer with us, that when the pipes came for the smaller pond and whatever they call it before they put the pipes in, they were standard size and they had to hire someone to cut them down. Now that was a minor thing, and it was a rumor, and that guy's long gone now. Another thing that when we were dealing with the Hartford on that space of land down there, the industrial park, it seems that people, when the sewers were going by, wanted to be sure that they made that property really attractive to folks. So they put in a V-shaped sewer line, because after all, you were going to put little buildings all around in there, because that was the kind of buildings that happened sometimes in suburbs. Totally lost the vision of one great big place. So the Hartford said, well, we want to put our data center over here and our life insurance over there. We had to accommodate and pay to move so it was minimal because we gave them no tax breaks coming in. But I just want to show that. So I'm going to tell a story on myself. We were trying to get this building changed to be the three groups together, police, fire, and education. A lot of people didn't like it. Some people wanted that to be the housing for the elderly. So we had a referendum, and on that day, we were going to address just the Belden renovation. However, 2 weeks before, the children's library room kept getting inundated with offal from the toilet. When anyone flushed in there, it came right in, right with the little bookies and the kids sitting on the floor. This was in the little old building there, And my goodness, that was a terrible thing. So I went up to the Public Works and said, let's get that fixed. Oh, we have to get a state permit. And because we have to cut into Route 10. So we did. And the state permit came in on the day of the referendum. And since the Public Works director at that time was from Bloomfield, had no idea we were having a referendum. And didn't the people up in Heritage Glen feel that they had a hard time getting out to vote at Eno? And didn't they sue us, saying that I had planned it all along? Well, let me tell you, I had no idea that was going in there. I do remember probably saying in a very loud voice, fix the darn toilet. And we had to go to court to New Britain. I got to know New Britain up close and personal in many, many trips down there. And at any rate, we won that case. But it cost the town a lot of money. And whether that would have happened with a town manager, I do not know. Would he too have been busy with the referendum and all the things that had to go? Don't know. But I do want you to know that in this wonderful world we've had definite bumps in the road. And yet we've had some wonderful good things, and we accomplished a lot. And whenever I wonder about some of those things, I just take a ride down Iron Horse Boulevard, because we made that happen by taking our troops from Simsbury, and we had a lot of them. We had our staff and our consultants, and we went up because someone in town had told the feds that we had federal wetlands, and how could we possibly build that road through the federal wetlands? There was an acre of federal wetlands. We certainly didn't need that road. So I went up, I made my presentation in Waltham, which was one of the places I lived growing up, to the Army Corps of Engineers. And I dropped by my brother's office, who at the time was the head of the BRA. They used to develop all over Boston. They still do, but he's somewhere else now. And took the staff, and my brother took them to the window, and he said, listen, if we can build around, we were on the 9th floor of the Boston City Hall, if we can look down there at Faneuil Hall and see Quincy Market, you can build a road in your little town. He said, I love that town, because he used to come down as a kid. So we had that kind of inspiration. That is some of the things the first selectman can do. Anita can speak to this. She's done a lot of these things where she brought some thoughts and ideas that perhaps we didn't have before. But I personally feel that with a manager, the reason I came forward now is, as I said, the world seems to be changing a lot. I've been very concerned about the revolving door I've seen in the finance office with some of the other issues that have popped up from time to time. And I think a professional manager is the way to go with that, because even on as I say, on the issues I've made to you before, I think the most important thing is that the people we are electing are good people. The people on the Board of Selectmen, I've known many of them, and some of them very well. And I don't see that they have the time to use their vision and leadership in terms of the way they run the town as well as they could if they weren't doing a lot of minutia in those legislative meetings. So I think the duties of the legislative body would be enhanced by having a town manager to take, and I told Bob DiCrescenzo I would quote him, because I think your minutes on page 2 of the minutes of February 18th, he talks about the differences in the fact that you would be passing these duties on. If you make a policy as a Board of Selectmen or council or whatever you call it, the manager would then be implementing that and working with the staff. And so I guess that's basically where I want to be. I have, obviously I could talk forever about it because I love the job, I love the town, and I want to see us be able to deal with the current reality of the world. And I think the people we elect deserve to have the support to use all of their leadership skills and not be involved in some of the day-to-day operations to the degree they are now. They should be free to make good, solid policy for the town. Thank you very much for...
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it. Any other members?
Natalie, can I
Ms.
just respond to it?
Yeah, sure.
I would just like to thank Peggy for coming, and since you mentioned my name, I'm going to speak up and say I think we have an awful lot in common about how we see the world and how we see Simsbury and the job, and I think it's very nice that you came out tonight.
Thank you, Anita. It's always good. And when Anita used to come to see me quite often with her 2 boys who were little then, and she always brought candy.
And when I was in the office, I had a dish sitting on my conference table. I think that's sweeping people up in the middle of the afternoon.
Thank you. I'm going to quit the trail, but thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care.
Nice
Okay.
seeing you
Ms. Carr,
again.
please.
I have a different picture of things. But anyway, you have revisionist history. At the last meeting, there was discussion about discussing the Canton Charter with shared responsibilities. Simsbury is a town of 24,000 residents. Canton has 10,000 residents. The Canton Charter states, Section 501, Chief Executive Officer, quote, "The first selectman is the Chief Executive Officer of the town and shall preside over all meetings of the Board of Selectmen. The first selectman shall oversee the affairs of the town," end quote. The Canton Charter assigns the first selectman as the chief executive officer of the town. As chief executive officer, there is ultimate power in that position. Any other duties or directives assigned to anyone else would lead to a conflict of duties and responsibilities. The Canton Charter also calls for a town meeting and a town moderator. Simsbury has grown into a community that has rejected this mechanism. The Simsbury Charter should reflect the growth and demands of the community and the need for a professional town manager with one voice going forward. We are living in a complex society with many risks and financial challenges that can be accomplished with long-term planning and professional guidance. Professionals who do business with the town would prefer interfacing with a professional than an elected official with no experience. It is my opinion that Administrative Assistant Tom Cook does not meet the minimum requirements for a professional town manager. At the last meeting, there was much decision of Simsbury's past history. It appeared to me that this was revisionist history, not fact. As a 40-year resident and a proponent of town manager for Simsbury, I have interfaced with First Selectman Peggy Shanks, Ted Tansey, Mary Glassman I, Anita Miller, Tom Vincent, Mary Glassman II, and Lisa Heavner. From my perspective, First Selectman Peggy Shanks had a very close relationship with Evan Wollicott, who was running the town behind the scenes. We voted for Peggy Shanks, but Evan Woolacott was the force behind the scenes. During her administration, we had an issue with water contamination in our wells that she was forced to address, almost firing the health director for requesting testing of the wells. The highway department was out of control and continually bullied an employee unmercifully. The police department had a reputation of being the Keystone Cops with unprofessional behavior. First Selectman Ted Tansey ruled the town with dictatorial powers after leaving the insurance industry. The result of Tansey removing me from a meeting initiated a lawsuit that I won, and we now have a resolution requiring the Board of Selectmen to provide 5 minutes of public audience and at least 20 minutes for that agenda item. This is now on display in the main meeting room. I was arrested at the town dump when I was collecting signatures for a referendum on the budget, sued the town, and it became a precedent-setting case that I won. There was a determination that in New England, the town dump was the gathering place for town residents and an appropriate place for gathering signatures for a budget referendum. The next election, the Democratic Party had a candidate who was being investigated by the Simsbury police for pornography. I was aware of the investigation and was adamant that this person should not be running for first selectman. I was told by the chairman of the Democratic Party that he was not going to win the election, and it doesn't matter. I then went to the press, and the Farmington Valley Press wrote the story of the investigation. The candidate withdrew, and Mary Glassman was positioned to run for town manager, was cajoled into running for first selectman as a token candidate. With all of the chaos in the town, in the Tansey administration, she won the election. First Selectman Anita Millard was elected when Mary Glassman, one, did not run for office. First Selectman Anita Millard threw out Paul Featherston with credentials as a town manager with a police escort. After the fiasco, Paul Featherston became town manager of Newington. First Selectman Tom Vincent was incapable of running a meeting and had Brandon Robertson, now town manager of Avon, writing script like a teleprompter for each meeting instead of doing his regular duties. There was mold contamination in the police department with employees wearing masks to work. A claim was filed and won that the police department's mold caused health issues, and health issues were ignored. Tom Vincent had the town attorney on speed dial since he had no clue as to manage the town. First Selectman Mary Glassman, too, loved Simsbury, but spent most of her time running for higher elected office. The community farm of Simsbury was sued for selling contaminated raw milk. First Selectman Lisa Heavner governs the town by committee, since she has no leadership skills. Committees are now assigned to give directives to the professional town employees, with Simsbury at a standstill. Many of the town employees are required to staff this proliferation of committees, taking time away from their duties. First Selectman Lisa Heavner is beholden to the Democratic Town Committee for advice and consent. The performing arts concerts promote marijuana smoking and tailgating at the concerts. Tailgating promotes excessive drinking and whatever. There are reports of public drunkenness and allegations of a rape at the concert. The risks to the town are enormous, and it is an accident waiting to happen. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Simsbury schools are governed by a professional superintendent, not a soccer mom. Simsbury should join the surrounding towns and have a town manager for Simsbury. The members of this commission should have the courage to bring Simsbury forward and have a charter with a paid town manager that lives in town as the CEO of Simsbury, with the town council manager for form of government with no salary for the elected officials. Mary Glassman is correct in her assessment that the risks to the town are so great with what we have. We can no longer continue with the present organization. Simsbury needs a professional town manager and should not continue to be half pregnant. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at Joan Coe, Simsbury Forum Topics, and Facebook News. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Coe. Any other members of the public?
Oh, I
Dr.
get another
what-
comment in here. She mentioned my name
Okay,
again.
fair enough.
Republican debate?
Sounds like the
I I would like to differ very strongly. Mrs. Cole has before charged the fact that I fired Paul Featherston, which I did not. Paul Featherston left for a job in Newington, and I immediately hired Brandon Robinson, who was the top of his class on the getting an MPA from UConn.
Thank you.
Can I just?
No, Ms. Cobb, please. Dr. Nolan?
I probably get a half an hour.
Oh, you?
basically.
Dr.
I
Nolan,
love
please.
stories. I love Mrs. Shank's stories. I moved to this town 45 years ago, and I've never been unhappy with the form of government. I was here when Mr. Russell Shaw was here. Peggy Shanks was here. Ted Tansey only lasted 2 years because of Mrs. Coe. And then Mrs. Glassman, Milliard, Vincent, and Mrs. Glassman again. Basically, we really had, over those 50-some-odd years, we really had 3 people who were in charge of our town. Shaw, Shanks, and Glassman, Milliard, and Vincent filled in a small part there. Town government worked well. Couple of stories, how this government really works. When I first came to town in the early 70s, I think it was in the early 80s, there was this big project going to take place. It was called the Hartford. We had a town meeting. In the old days, I loved it. We moved to town, and I came from a big city, and we had this town form of government which was run by a town meeting. It's amazing. You know, people got up and spoke, and they, gave their opinions, and finally everybody took a vote, and they stood up, and it was over. Then a bunch of New York lawyers moved into town, and they used Robert's rules to make sure that there was no more discussion. They called a question immediately, and there was a vote, and it was done. So that government went haywire. During the meeting for the Hartford, we had 6,000 plus people turn out for that town meeting. It was to give the land that's in question now that you know about to the Hartford. There was a lot of problems with how that was going to be approved. But we had this big meeting, and 6,500 people showed up. They were all over the place. They were outside in the drive. They were in the gymnasium. At that time, Mr. Willicott was the moderator of the meeting. Well, it was a hot night, and of the 6,500 people there, 6,499 you wanted the Hartford to come to town. There's no question about it, under any circumstances. But we had a chairman of the board of finance. His name was Mr. Sanger. And Mr. Sanger had a little bit of information he wanted to impart to the people at the meeting. But he wanted us to talk about the deal. He didn't think it was a good deal financially. He thought the town was, could have got a better deal. And he wanted to tell people why. However, Mr. Willicott, came up to me. Now, I know Mr. Willicott only for about a month or two. I got friendly with him. Hell of a nice guy. And I'm sitting in the first row, second seat there, like I always sit. And he comes up to me and he says, it's a very hot night, Everybody wants this thing to go through, Let's get this over with. The person who was supposed to call the question was our state rep. Can't think of her name right now.
Conley. Virginia Conley?
Virginia, yes.
Right.
She was supposed to call the question, but they thought that looked like a fix-up. So they said, Mike, you go in the gymnasium and you call the question. I don't know what the hell I was doing, to be quite honest. I go in the gymnasium and somebody says, somebody in the gymnasium want to say something. I rose my hand. Yeah, I say something. What do you want to do? I want to call the question. I had no idea what I was doing. So I called the question. Somebody seconded it. Vote was taken. It was done. Mr. Sanger found me. He said, "What the hell are you doing, kid?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, I called the question. He says, "I was about to speak next." That's a little story. Now, another little story. If you're look, I got another little story.
Let me interrupt you for a minute. You've really exceeded 5 minutes by a lot already. If you could begin to wrap up or hold what you want to speak to the next public audience at the end of the meeting.
Then I'll have to say I got a nice story.
That's,
You want to hear the story?
I'm sure it's a great story, but that's okay.
I'll give you the story.
No, give me the story at the second public audience.
Okay.
You can do it then.
Anyways, like I said, I've always been satisfied with our town form of government. We have good people. They do a good job. A couple of years ago, 6 elective officers on the Board of Selectmen, 3 who were lawyers, I believe, and 4 who were of the Republican Party, at the recommendation of our first selectwoman, hired a consultant to, quote, professionalize her administration. The question is why? I'll leave that up to you. The consultant's report was quite clear. Increase the duties and responsibilities of the staff, include new designations, and increase salaries to those people with new responsibilities and duties, and to correspondingly reduce the duties and responsibilities of the first selectman with a corresponding decrease in salary at the end of her term. You all know the story. I won't repeat it. The board accepted the consultant's recommendation, and unanimously the consultant's recommendations, and these recommendations were instituted. Now, we have 3 lawyers sitting there, and they institute a town form of government that was not in keeping with the charter. We call that a constitutional crisis sometimes, rather than a charter crisis. So the question really is then, why did they do this? And I think that's why you have to figure out why they did this. Because we're not going back to where we came from. I don't think so. Because the form of government we have now is totally different than what's in the charter. And Mr. Cook can tell you that with his responsibilities, this form of government works. Nothing wrong with it. In fact, it may be even better. But my problem is we, the voters, should have a choice in the form of government that we basically have to work under. And I think it's your responsibility, as we have shown here, is that whatever your recommendations are, and I know they're quite split almost down the middle here, that the Board of Selectmen should get not one recommendation, but at least 2 recommendations of the form of government you've decided on, some form of hybrid like we have now, or a town manager, which has been proposed, and I have no personal reason to want one over the other, to be quite honest. But the voters should be able to make that choice on a referendum. And we should have a town meeting with this board here answering all the questions, because you all know the forms of government. You've had many consultants come in here and go over them with you. And the public should be able to ask those questions. Now, the public should have been here during these meetings. They didn't come. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have a town meeting before a referendum to educate the public on the various forms of government that you could propose to them. Because we're not going back to where we were. We have a change. And that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Melvin. Please.
Hi, I'm Bill Gallagher. I live at 2 Highwood. I'd just like to make a few comments in response to some of the questions asked and remarks made at the last commission meeting. Before I do, I'd just like to provide a little background so that my comments can be framed within the intended context. My wife and I moved to Simsbury in the summer of 1996. We were planning a family, and we knew about and we were impressed by the fact that Simsbury was regarded as one of the best school systems in the state of Connecticut at that time. In fact, that was one of the selling points for us when we chose to move to Simsbury. Over the next couple of years, we grew to a family of 4 with the birth of our 2 sons. And today, our boys are attending both Simsbury High School and Henry James, and Simsbury still remains regarded as one of the best school systems in the state. As parents, this is something that we're extremely pleased about, and as residents of Simsbury, this is something that we're all very proud of. And we recognize that this standard of excellence, could not be possible without an extremely competent and functional Board of Education. But that brings me to the reason why I'm here to speak to you tonight. Regarding the Board of Education, one of the commission members asked something during the most recent meeting to the effect of exactly what problem are we trying to solve. The main problem that I see is the exclusivity and lack of transparency of the process in which populates the Board of Education. Despite the appearance of an election every other year, in reality, membership on the board is by appointment only and is solely at the discretion of the 2 town party committees. Nothing that happens at the polls on election day has any bearing on the membership of the Board of Education, as all the seats have effectively already been predetermined, and the election process is essentially meaningless. But the most troubling part to me of this is the fact that left out of this exclusive process is the largest demographic block of citizens in the town, and that is the 38% of voters who are registered as unaffiliated with a political party. Unaffiliated citizens in Simsbury today have no say in the appointment of members to the Board of Education, and as I pointed out, their votes on election day with respect to the board are meaningless, and this just feels very wrong. Over the past couple weeks, I've heard a couple of suggestions on how to address this. One suggestion is that an unaffiliated citizen can, or really any citizen, who wish to be a candidate for the Board of Education can get on the ballot as a petitioning candidate. And while this is certainly true, recent history shows that this is not really a viable path to political success in our town. Over the past 3 municipal elections, 3 petitioning candidates have appeared on the ballots for various seats, including one for the Board of Education in 2013. And none of those 3 have been able to get more than 2.8% of the vote. Another suggestion that I've heard was for the formation of a third party that can nominate its own slate of candidates for seats on the ballot. However, once again, recent history shows that this is not a good path toward success. In 2011, the Simsbury Citizens First Party put 3 candidates on the ballot for various seats, and while they had more success than true petitioning candidates, they each were only able to get about 14.5% of the vote for the seats that they competed for. And each one of these candidates finished last in their respective race. The Simsbury Citizens First Party appears to have become dormant, if not completely dead, following the elections of 2011. Now, another comment that was made in the last meeting concerning how membership on the Board of Education is determined is that the current way that it's done depoliticizes both the process and the board itself. And while I think that's a very noble goal, I have to disagree with the characterization that the process is in fact depoliticized. As I mentioned earlier, the makeup of the board is exclusively determined by appointment by the 2 town party committees, thus leaving 38% of the unaffiliated voting citizens in Simsbury out of the process. When a plurality of voters is essentially disenfranchised with respect to how membership on the board is determined, being told that the current process is depoliticized is a hard pill to swallow. The message that the unaffiliated voter in this town comes away with is that, or as he or she becomes more and more aware of how the process actually works, is that the 2 town party committees are essentially saying, the Board of Education is our playground and you can't play on it because you're not one of us. As I mentioned a few moments ago, the intent of depoliticizing the process of populating the board is a noble and well-intentioned goal. I truly believe that. But in reality, the way in which they attempt to achieve that just doesn't really pass the smell test. So in the end, what would I like to see come out of this? I'd like to see some sort of changes that offer more opportunities for the politically unaffiliated citizens and voters of this town to serve on the Board of Education. What exactly those changes might be, or how I think we could or should get there, I don't know. But as I mentioned earlier, the current exclusivity of the process virtually eliminates any citizen of this town who has not aligned themselves with either the Democratic or Republican parties in this town from having any say on who serves on the Board of Education. Any process that excludes the largest political demographic of voters and citizens in our town needs a critical examination, and this is something that I hope this commission will strive to acknowledge and address going forward. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Yellen.
Thank you.
Ask a question, Holly?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Yellen, 1 second, please.
Bill,
Sure.
you know, I've been following this issue, and
Yep.
I've been kind of grappling with it myself. The question I have is, do you know of any towns that have a robust unaffiliated participation on their Board of Education? Is there an elected town, or a town that has an elected form of government for their BOE that has unaffiliateds participating? Is there an appointed, or a town that follows an appointment method of BOE? Do you know of other towns that are doing this better than we are?
I haven't done any of that research.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd be very, if you come across that information, I'd be very interested to see how they're doing it.
Oh, sure. No, that's a great question, and
Okay.
maybe I will
Great.
look into that.
Okay, great.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Any
you.
other members of the public? No, I think everybody's here. Okay, we are now moving on, review the minutes of February 18th. Does anybody have any corrections? Commission?
I have a question. I wasn't at the meeting, I apologize, but I did have a question. On the minutes, it said that the vote for town manager was 3 commissioners, but then when it went, at the end, it said that 2 commissioners were in favor of a hybrid. So it's a little confusing to me what the final vote was.
No, 4
There are
were
4 in
Four.
favor. There was a difference in, I think it was the discussion, the 2 members talked about the hybrid.
Okay,
but when
so
they actually did
so the vote
straw-
is actually correct.
But when they actually did the straw
Okay,
vote.
thank
that's
you.
what,
Thanks for the clarification.
And Melissa made a comment, Melissa had made a comment
Melissa
on
made a
it, but
comment.
since
She
she
wasn't
wasn't
here,
here,
so
we
she
didn't
didn't
include
actually
that.
vote.
Okay, I was trying to
I commented?
clarify.
No, you sent the
Oh,
email,
thank you,
which
thank you.
Okay.
which I reported to the body.
Thank you for the clarification.
Anything else? Okay, before we move on to the next item, I just want to make everybody aware, I had gotten a letter from Mr. Collickman asking me as chair to reconsider the discussion on the constables. I actually got a real piece of paper, the letter, and I replied to him in kind, saying as there was absolutely no support indicated by the body, that I had no intention of bringing it up for reconsideration. So I just wanted to let you all know I'd heard from him, and I replied to him.
Did we adopt these?
Okay, not yet.
Okay.
No, no, it's just, there was a conversation, there was no support for it at all.
No, it's like the minutes.
Oh, the minutes? Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
Yeah,
to
please.
adopt. I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes of February 18th, 2016.
Second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Unanimous?
I'm abstaining.
And abstain.
I wasn't here.
So we have 3 people abstaining. Okay, the three who weren't here abstained. Melissa, Anita, and Mary. Okay, now we're on to the real fun item that we've all been looking forward to, is discussion on the possible action on Simsbury form of government. Who wants to kick it off?
Sure,
Please, Paul.
thank you. Okay, I'll kick it off here. And first, I want to thank everybody who's came and spoke, whether it be Mrs. Coe or Dr. Rinaldi, or certainly Peggy Shanks, who I have a great deal of respect for and have known for a very long time. I think I'm harking back to some of the things I had said in the beginning of this process around, one of the things that I would look at would be, what would be a change that would significantly improve Simsbury, okay? Whether it be improve our financial standing with our bond agencies, improve safety, improve our educational system, those types of things. So looking to those types of things. And I think every commissioner here has done a good job of doing their homework and what they've tried to do. I also listened to the issues around what do we think we need to do with respect to making a change from a professional standpoint. Some of the things that we've talked about regarding, legal liability, what we might have, or professional staff, which I think over the last number of years we've done a very good job of building professional staff, and I mean that. I think we should be very proud of that as a community and as the leaders of the town who have done this, and especially from Mary's standpoint and what Anita's done. So, what I'm going to do is follow along a little bit about what we did regarding a hybrid. Okay, so I would like to make a motion with respect to the hybrid and put that out there for our discussion to have a hybrid, because I think it sort of fits as to taking care of what we need to do from a professional standpoint, giving the Director of Services more duties, making it in the charter, but yet keeping the First Selectman position and still having significant responsibilities. So, actually, the timing was pretty good. We did get something from Bob, the town attorney, today, which I think you all have. So it's the chapter, it says Chapter 7 with Chief Administrative Officer, March 2nd. So what I'm going to do is make a motion that we adopt the Chief Administrative Officer as a charter provision. I'll read it. I know you've all got it, but let me read it. I think it's important to read this. So my motion is going to be that within the charter, we have the additional provisions that will apply. One, the Chief Administrative Officer, who shall be the Chief Administration Official of the town and shall serve at the pleasure of the First Selectman. The Chief Administrative Officer shall be appointed exclusively on the basis of executive and administrative qualifications, character, education, training, and experience. The Chief Administrative Officer shall be responsible to the First Selectman for carrying out all acts and policies of the Board of Selectmen and all resolutions and ordinances adopted by the town. The Chief Administrative Officer shall be responsible for the administration of the town consistent with the policies established by the Board of Selectmen and for carrying out such other duties and responsibilities as set forth in this charter. The compensation and benefits of the Chief Administrative Officer shall be fixed by the Board of Selectmen and shall not be decreased except at the beginning of the fiscal year of the town by a vote of the Board of Selectmen taken at least 1 month prior to that date. There is one thing in there also that is that this would be something where the Chief Administrative Officer would report to the First Selectman. And I think it's important that we recognize that. We could certainly go through this, but I want to put that out there as a motion. I think it fits what we wanted to do from a personnel standpoint. I believe it addresses some of the things that were pointed out in the Erdman study, and I think it's good for the town in that it addresses professional management, policy decisions, and is something that the residents of Simsbury would be proud of that we would adopt. So that's my motion.
Okay, just before we even ask for a second, do you want to formalize the last part of that?
I would. You're talking about from the standpoint of the duties. Is that what you were talking to?
At the very end, after you read the segment that Bob had printed up for us, or put together for us, I should say, you made 1 or 2 little minor extra recommendations.
No, I'll stick with
Okay.
I'll stick with what
Okay.
what Bob wrote, and I think that was pretty good.
May I ask
Okay.
for a clarification before
Sure.
we move on? Paul, Section 412, the second paragraph, you said the Chief Administrative Officer shall be responsible to the First Selectman whereas what Bob wrote says
No, he's-
Board
Shall
of
be
Selectmen.
responsible to the first selectman.
There's
You're
two
looking at a
there's
different
already-
I'm looking at a
You're looking at a
draft.
different one.
Two drafts.
Thank
That's why I
you.
said there was that little conflict.
Thank you.
Right.
So we got this.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now I know what we're looking at.
Well, First, let's see if we have a second.
Yeah, before there's discussion, we
Yeah,
got
let's see if we have a
Is there a
second.
second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Jeff. Okay, now we go to discussion. Now, if there are questions, comments?
So we got this afternoon,
Right.
and it wasn't any context around it. So I'm just trying to understand, you know, where this come from and kind of as we looked at the matrix that was put
Right.
together, is this one of these forms here? So, for example, who, in this particular structure, who is the CEO?
When you say who is the CEO, I'm not sure that we want to go with the business term of it, but the first selectman, okay, is still somebody who has the Director of Administrative Services reporting to them, along with the police chief, and the Board of Selectmen would make that decision along with the first selectman on hiring and firing decisions with respect to that. I would, if you want to use the term of chief executive officer, I would say the first selectman would still be the chief executive officer. They're selected by the voters of the town. And if you want to use the business term, the Director of Administrative Services would be more the chief operating officer. That's how I would view it, if you want to put it in that context, Bob.
Okay. So it's still confusing to me? I apologize.
Let's try
No,
to
no,
use
it's
the
good.
same terms. I
Yeah,
think that's really confusing.
right.
Okay. Ed, you had something?
Well, yeah, I have a
Did you
suggestion
say
too.
that this matches your hybrid in the matrix?
Yeah, Bob, you're probably better off sitting up
Yeah, you-
here now.
I'm confused
Yes, what I did is, some time ago, I gave you, I guess, we also gave you a copy of the January language for the chief administrative officer, and that's really the town manager on the hybrid, the way that's laid out. The document that's the subject of the motion is more the hybrid CAO, where the first selectman retains the CEO, would be the CEO on that designation. The chief administrative officer would, under the second scenario, the hybrid scenario, works at the direction of the first selectman. The first selectman recommends the appointment to the board of selectmen of that individual. Now, what's most important about what you have in front of you is the CAO is a position that is a town officer on par with the town clerk, the director of Parks and Rec, the director of finance, and serves for an indefinite term. Now, that's a very important distinction. That means that that position is subject to what I call the civil service requirements, that dismissal for just cause and all the requirements that law puts behind that public position. As opposed to today, where the chief of administrative services, Tom's job, is that position's appointed by the first selectman for the term of the first selectman. New incoming first selectman doesn't have to continue on with that position. It just so happens that in the last 20 years, the chief of administrative services has carried on through administrations, and I think to the credit of the town, because you've had good people over the last 20 years. This puts that position in the charter, and once that position is appointed, that position is appointed for an indefinite term, the same as the director of finance, the same as the town clerk, the same as the other charter positions. But it's not the chief executive officer as a town manager would be.
Mary?
For clarification, this is less of a position than we currently have.
I can't hear you, Mary.
Is this less than the position we currently have? Because the position right now is not at the discretion of the first selectman. But this position, as it's proposed, doesn't have any responsibility for personnel responsibility, doesn't have any review of performance and, performance evaluation. It doesn't, I mean, looking down the list, it doesn't do anything.
That's intentional because I didn't want to presume what this commission would want to add to that. I gave you the framework.
Yeah, so, but I'm just saying, as it's
Yeah.
written, it doesn't, the position is at the discretion of the first selectman, which it's not now, because now it's a town, position for cause, and, you wouldn't, it's not at the discretion of the first selectman now. I guess going back just to put this in context, the reason, and Mr. Rinaldi made a good point, why did we get to this point where at the last charter revision, the charter revision said the first selectman may assign personnel responsibilities to a professional staff person. And I think it was an evolutionary process because we are fortunate that the town has worked well, but we saw that the increasing risks and responsibilities put the town at risk. So we evolved to the point where we recognize that those personnel functions probably belong to a professional rather than elected person. But it was optional, and so that was always cause for concern because the first selectman who had no experience in personnel could retain that responsibility. So I guess I'm just worried that this doesn't codify what we're doing.
Can I ask a clarification?
Well, Can I do a
clarification?
clarification?
First of all, Bob, you want to
Okay.
respond to Mary
Yeah, could I have
first?
my question answered?
Yeah,
I was responding to Mary.
Let's finish
I was
with
responding to
Mary
Mary.
first. Let Bob first.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to understand the motion before us.
Yeah, that's fine. That's valid, Mary.
Before I
It's very
can
valid.
decide if I support it or not.
Couple things. The draft that I gave to Tom to circulate to the commission was really a framework that the commission could tailor to the matrix. Secondly, I personally think it's a mistake to put too much in the charter in terms of specific functions. I think that's better, that's more appropriate in a job description and perhaps an ordinance that says the job description shall have no less than these duties, because this changes over time, and you don't want to have to put together a charter revision commission to allow this position to change with the times. That's where we got to today, where the personnel function is so much at issue. Perhaps the personnel function, the definition of the personnel function, shouldn't be in the charter at all. Perhaps it should be part of a job description or an ordinance, so that as things change, you don't have to change the charter to adapt to the changes that you're confronted with. You can amend an ordinance, you can amend the job description, which is, there's a process in the ordinance to do that. It's too fine of a description of a position, and that's why you see the other positions in there, town clerk and director of finance. The duties and functions of those positions aren't in the charter either, for good reason. I mean, director of finance is a good example. We all know, we kind of know what a director of finance does. It's not spelled out in fine detail in the charter, neither should the chief administrative officer be spelled out. Now, having said that, you are perfectly empowered to do that if you choose. I just recommend against it, because that's sort of why we're here today with a new charter revision commission 3 years after the last charter revision commission, because this issue of, was the personnel function properly described or described the way people are comfortable with. I don't think you should put it in the charter at all. Leave that to an ordinance, leave it to a job description, leave it to subject to definition by the Board of Selectmen. But at least you have and I'm not advocating for anything on this matrix, but I'm saying if you're going to do a hybrid CAO, there's no question in my mind that you have to have that person report to your first selectman. Because if you don't, you can't have a CAO report to the Board of Selectmen and have a first selectman with some remnants of executive responsibility. That just doesn't work. So that's why I'm saying, the way I've written it, it has to be the first selectman appoints with essentially confirmation by the Board of Selectmen, subject to job description to be established recommended by the first selectman and adopted by the board of selectmen, that's where you get into the fine detail of who signs the PAF form, who does the discipline, who does the hiring and firing, who does, that can all be spelled out afterwards. Need a second.
A comment and a question. The comment is that the personnel duties have been in the charter for a long time.
Well, they
That's
have.
not
Under
a
the first
recent-
selectman, right?
Yeah,
Right.
that's not a recent addition.
No, it's not.
And that's
Been there a
probably
long
why
time.
That should be
we've always
adjusted.
looked at it as needing to be there somehow. My question is on your little four-column
Mm-hmm.
chart here. It's 4 columns, but it's really 3 choices, right?
3 choices.
So the columns 3 and 4 really reflect the one choice.
The fourth column was to give the commission an idea of what the first selectman's office would look like.
So 3 and 4
Under a
really go
hybrid.
together.
That's true, yes.
2 halves of the picture, yeah. I found that very confusing when I
Yes.
read this at first.
Well, we added that at last, that was last, it used to be a 3-column chart. But then I thought, well, we should probably put a column in there to let you look at what's left of the first selectman's responsibilities. Probably isn't labeled as best it could be.
Hadley? Anita, you done?
I'm done.
Okay, yeah, Ed, please.
I have a procedural issue. I assume that everybody here is prepared to take a final vote, even though we didn't ask that question to begin with. But also procedurally, by virtue of the motion that's on the table now, we preclude voting for an alternative. Whereas in fact, if we reversed it and voted first pro or con for a manager, and if we don't want the manager, we've left the option open to do this. So we're going to a conclusion without ever taking a vote of, do we want a manager?
No, for 2 reasons. Number one, it can be voted down. Okay?
I'm sorry,
Number one, it can be voted down, okay, which opens the door to any number of other choices.
well, that's true, but
Okay.
then how do we come back to it? Or do we come back to it?
But if we vote down a town manager, we still have an opportunity for a hybrid. Whereas
right.
if we vote down a hybrid, we've said no to that, and now we have to choose
Now we
between
have
town
nothing.
manager and first
That's
selectman.
right, that's my
No,
point.
technically what you can do is whoever voted on the positive side, if they want to readdress this, let's say, for example, if this gets approved and somebody wants to rethink it and go to the town manager, somebody who voted in the positive can ask for a reconsideration, and you can kick that out and get back to the town manager thing. I mean, that's how it works. You know, you might not be thrilled, but I'm saying that's how it works. And you could say that about any of the possible options. If we vote for one, basically what you're saying is, let's vote for the ones that don't get approved first. Because whichever one you get approved, you're now going to say would preclude the other ones.
Well, I think
No.
that, I think that
That's
the
what I think
problem
we're
is that there may be people who don't want a town manager, but may be, or may want one or the other, but feel forced to vote for the hybrid, lest they be left with only a first selectman as an option. Is that your concern?
Yeah, I mean, my point is, I mean, I favor a town manager, but if we don't have a town manager, then my second choice is to go with what the motion is. But by addressing the motion, you've precluded my testing the waters or getting a vote for the town manager.
Well, you currently
Is that
have,
what we did
you
the other
currently
night,
have a
though?
motion on the floor. It's been seconded.
I understand that.
So we can have the discussion. If you want to make the case for going to the town manager, make the case, and maybe it'll be voted, maybe this motion will be voted down.
Well, I don't want, but that's not, my intent is not to disagree with people who want a hybrid. My intent was that we should look at the manager first.
Because that is the charge in the charter.
Yeah. Because if I favor a manager, but could live with a hybrid, then I'm going to say no to this vote. And what does that mean? Then what does that leave me with? Then
Bob, I'm going to throw it to you.
I may not be articulating that
No,
right,
I think-
but
I
I
know-
think we have an issue here.
I know where you're going. My concern is no matter which one we take up first, we run into the same issue.
I don't think you do. I think if you vote down the town manager,
Okay, but what happens if you vote for a town manager and somebody would prefer the hybrid,
You've done the same thing,
You know?
except it's been reversed.
That's
I'm
what I'm
voting
saying.
against everything.
That's easy. That's easy.
I'm just
You see what I'm
voting
saying?
no.
Basically, we've got three things to vote for,
Right.
and you either vote yes or no, so you only have two ways to vote.
But you only can
That's
hear one
right.
at a time.
Yeah,
Right,
and-
that's the
right.
thing.
But-
So you're
yeah.
voting
That's why we're
no
having a
before you hear the other
discussion.
But
thing.
that's, which is why we're
That's
talking
why you're
about
having
it.
the discussion. And the other thing, may I?
You may.
Mr. Chairman? We had a straw vote the other day, okay? And the one that came out with the most votes was the hybrid. So because of that, now I recognize some members weren't here, but because of that, I think that's the one we should go with first. That's why I put that motion on the table, and that's why I think if it gets voted down, then we go to the next one. And that's my rationale
And
for
my,
that.
and my feeling on Roberts is we do have a motion on the floor, it has been seconded, and we deal with it as it is. You know, and I understand what you're saying, but because you have three conflicting or complementary, whatever you want to call it, three different issues that we've looked at, one has to come up first. And the one that's come up first and the one that's on the floor is Paul's motion. So that's where we are.
So can I get some clarity then?
Can you get what?
Can I get some clarity around this hybrid?
Clarity on this.
I'd like to
Oh,
understand.
yeah, oh, yeah,
Sure,
sure.
I mean, that's
yeah,
why we're
still-
having discussion.
No, we're still
It's
talking.
open for
No,
discussion.
We're still
So-
going.
So the way this was articulated us initially, the currently, with a first selectman form of government, this person, that's a paid position. That person is in charge, if you will, of managing the town and running the town, hires and fires, what have you, all these things here. With the town manager, the first selectman who is elected sets policy. It's a unpaid position.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Still can be paid.
Yeah. Could be. But basically, the day-to-day running of the town then is given to the town manager. Okay. And the hybrid, I guess my question becomes, if the CEO, if we're using that term, who's in charge at the end of the day? Who's the boss? Okay, if it's still the first selectman, then and that's what I'm trying to understand. Then the issues and concerns I would have is you've got someone who's an elected official who is not professionally trained, who is not experienced, who's in charge of managing people who are professionally trained, who do bring a lot of experience to the table, and that is a very frustrating position to be in, and would create a lot more. Be difficult to hire people, be difficult to retain people, and we would continue to see, short-term people leaving and a lot more chaos going on. I just think it's a very poor form of government. We got to, I just don't think that's the way to go.
Okay. Melissa?
Two questions.
Sure.
One, in essence, isn't that what we're living with right now? Am I right about that? Professional people reporting to elected people, right? Just like they would say, where I come from, New York City.
And I have problems with the way things.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so that's question one. Question two, Bob, you had said this would be the CAO that we're talking about, would be a civil service type of position that we could not.
Not civil
No,
service.
not the way it's written. It's,
No, but who was it who said they'd be only for cause and?
that was under the
When-
old system.
Okay.
The way the draft, the motion, the position of CAO serves for an indefinite term,
Like the other positions.
like the other positions. It does not,
Pleasure of the first selectman. And shall serve at the pleasure of the first selectman. What am I reading wrong? The draft that
I gave mine to Joan.
I just want to know what our ability is to
motion
hire and
before
fire.
the body is.
In the first paragraph, Bob.
Reading this one. You read this one,
Yeah, this is the one.
I read this one,
which
okay?
said,
but it-
shall serve at the pleasure of the first selectman.
Again,
That's
that's
what mine says.
what it says.
Right.
Okay,
Right, where
just
you,
clarification. I think also up here it says Chief Administrative Officer, each of whom shall serve for an indefinite term unless otherwise established in Section
And this is
704.
unless otherwise established.
So this is the Board of Selectmen, okay? If you wanted to make, or we can make changes in that, this is like the broad thing. If you want to make it modifications of it, I can make a modification of that motion. If you want to.
I'm not ready to modify, I have concerns about that
No, the way you're reading it is
Understand.
correct.
Are we proposing somebody who we don't have the ability to hire and fire easily, or proposing somebody
If
who
you-
is protected and we've got all sorts of litigation issues if we don't think they're doing a good job?
If you want to make it crystal clear, and again, I just gave you draft language to work off of. If you want to make it crystal clear that the chief administrative officer serves for an indefinite term like all of these other town officers, the town engineer, the director of public works, you would delete "shall serve at the pleasure of the first selectman."
And if we wanted to make it for a contract period, we would also insert that language.
That's
So there's
correct.
options.
So there is that option.
So mix and match. So,
Can I just build off your question though? So, but if you take away serving at the pleasure of the first selectman, getting to your question, how do you remove any of these? Quite frankly,
Through the progressive discipline process, just
Like
cause
any-
standard,
But
just
who's
like,
making that call?
well, the first selectman would,
Okay.
But
as the-
also,
as the appointing
but there's a
authority.
process.
Okay.
But-
Oh, no. Okay. Okay.
right, but also just at the beginning of section 704, town officers, the first selectman shall appoint and may remove each such action to be taken with the approval of the Board of Selectmen. So it puts that job of chief administrative officer the same as town clerk, director of finance, treasurer, director of cultural parks. It puts it.
I disagree. I disagree,
Yeah.
because this language says, shall serve at the pleasure of the
Well,
first.
that's,
take
that's
that
the
out.
point.
Take
Would-
that.
You'd take that out.
I would suggest at least.
Can I
Okay,
make
Anita?
a suggestion?
Sure.
Paul's motion was very detailed. And maybe it shouldn't be at this point. Maybe we should just vote for the concept and then hammer out the details. Because we might be hammering out details that we're not ever going to deal with if we get a town manager vote.
Let me clarify something. The draft I've given you is one version of the so-called hybrid.
So if we vote for this motion, we're not stuck with this language.
No, this is just draft language, something to work off of. You can change this language any way you
The
want.
motion is fairly.
Right, I think we're
motion
stuck
specific.
with the-
I think we're stuck with the motion.
Well, unless, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds of Robert's rules, but the maker of the motion could always accept an amendment to,
Oh, yeah, no, I know that. The other question I have is, we are going to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. Okay, when we make a recommendation, do we have to give them this specific language? Or do we,
Yeah, you have to give them-
or can we just go to them and
Which would
say,
we
we are
have to hammer out.
Yeah, I'm
You'd
saying.
also have to hammer out, what adjustments do you make to the duties of the first selectman?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
I'm ready to vote.
Do we go to them and say, look, we are recommending this general.
I'm ready to
No,
vote.
what I'm saying is, do we go to them and say, we are recommending this general form of government, and we're recommending X, Y, and Z, but they've got to do the specifics?
No, we do.
What
Are
you're
we
gonna
do?
do
Are we going
is-
to do the specifics?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to make
what you're
sure.
going to transmit to the Board of Selectmen is two things. One is the report of the Simsbury Charter Revision Commission.
Right.
Attached to that report is going to be a proposed
Some specific
draft
language.
charter.
Right, gotcha.
And in that proposed draft charter is going to be all of the language which supports the decisions
The
you've made in
recommendation
the
from the-
report, the
okay.
recommendation.
Okay.
Now, the Board of Selectmen, as you know, can do three things with that. Can reject it outright and say, go home and you're done. It can accept it in total and set it for referendum, or it can send it back to you and say, well, good job, but we'd like you to look at this, this, and this again. And you can, at that point, do one of two things. You can say, no, thank you, and send it back, or you can adjust it
Tweak it
accordingly.
at that
Right.
point.
I think what may help is if you look at the executive function, the column on the left, what Tom and I tried to do is identify all of those aspects of the executive function of town government and assign it to a position based on the three options which you've outlined. And, the first one is pretty straightforward. That's what you have today. The second one is what you would have to do if you wanted a full-blown town manager. That's the way the charter would have to read. And the third one is where it gets a little confusing, where you can pick and choose which executive functions you want the chief administrative officer to have and which ones you want to leave with the first selectman. And the draft language I've given you here is a version of that, just to give you a place to start in terms of the language, because all of this has to be turned into language of the charter specifically, and that's where I've tried to get you a starting point. If you want a hybrid version of a CAO that survives the changes in the first selectman's office, then you would take out the phrase "and shall serve at the pleasure of the first selectman" to clarify that it's recommended by the first selectman, appointed by the board of selectmen, and once that individual is in place, he or she serves for an indefinite term and can be removed the way all public employees are removed.
Which
Or-
reversed
or
the
they
section
serve-
704.
Or contract.
Or by contract.
Yeah.
Or by contract.
Whichever we
Right.
choose, yeah.
You can definitely do it by contract, as long as the charter's clear.
Lydia?
All right, I had a question, as long as it's clear. You mentioned before, who chooses? You were mentioning something about going in that column, about choosing in column 3?
You choose.
We choose. So we make the decision to choose. It comes from this commission.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Please.
Bob, if we proceed under a hybrid form, there has to be at least one thing that the first select person controls, right? Otherwise, it's not hybrid. Now, are there things, so let's look at what we're talking about here. So, under the hybrid you're proposing, Paul, which items are you proposing that the first select person will reserve power over?
Let me start at the top, okay? First, the preface saying, I believe and I'll use the term CAO, okay? The CAO reports to the first selectman, okay? As would the police chief. I don't think that has to go in that, okay? Appointed by the first selectman and with the board of, just like the other officers, okay, with the approval of the board of selectmen, okay? Okay, term, contract or appointment of an indefinite term, all right? I don't believe the town clerk is by contract.
No.
I don't believe the others are by contract. So I would keep that in the same category. However, I'm not wedded to that, okay? Appoints directors, okay? And if we're talking about the finance director, the director of cultural parks and rec, the director of civil preparedness, I would say no, because that's in 708 is the first selectman with the approval, okay?
So you want that to remain in the first select person's purview?
That's, but we could discuss that, okay? Prepares town budgets for submission to the Board of Selectmen, okay? I think that should be something that they should do.
They, the
all right?
CAO.
Correct, okay?
Wait a minute.
Discipline,
So the town budget would go from the CAO to the Board of Selectmen?
I would say that it would go to the Board of Selectmen, okay? But again, we could discuss, I'm just throwing that out there, okay? Discipline of employees, right now that's in the first selectman. I would say that would probably make sense to be there, all right? Because it's personnel issues. That was one of the things that was discussed, personnel issues.
So the first select person
They are
doesn't
being
make...
the CAO?
CAO.
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 Right.
I thought you meant the other thing.
No.
Yeah.
No. Promotion of employees, I would think that would be with the CAO as well. Negotiate union contracts. I know that the Director of Administrative Services now works and negotiates contracts in consultation with the First Selectman. And I think that's appropriate because it eventually goes to the Board of Selectmen.
So that's a first select person
Right.
purview.
Okay, or consultation, okay?
Well,
You can't say
consult, I mean, who is responsible to negotiate the contract? Is it going to be the first select person, or is it going to be the CAO?
I would say, right now, I think they're negotiated by the CAO or the Director of Administrative Services.
We're going to have to be pretty definitive in our language. Is it going to be first select person or CAO?
If you want a definitive answer right now, I'd say CAO, okay? And then it goes to the First Selectman.
Good answer.
Well,
Everything
For what?
I think is good.
It's got to go to the first selectman to go to the Board of Fin, to
So
the
this
Board
first select
of, Board
person
of Selectmen.
can overrule the CAO on that? Really? Really? That's what we want? Okay. So it's really not CAO, it's first select person. So what I'm trying to identify is, so far we're going CAO, CAO, CAO. So we're going to pay somebody $70,000 or whatever the
No, we're
first
not.
select
Wait
person
a minute,
pays.
wait a minute, hold on. I didn't say that. And I think we should not get into any of that. I think the salary for the first selectman should be rest with the Board of Selectmen. I don't think we as a charter want to get into that.
But I think we need to understand what we're recommending in terms of, are we having a voluntary position, or are we having somebody who's, working, and this is,
Can we go
are we
through-
leaving enough in the first selectman's job to not only justify, but really to mandate that there's some kind of pay with
I
it?
would think you would want to leave enough in there. If you're going to have the CAO report to the first selectman, and you're going to have the police chief report to the first selectman, I think you need to have that as a substantial position, okay? But I don't think we need to put in the charter
How much it is.
what the salary should be.
Okay.
I think that should be left to the Board of Selectmen.
All right, but let's just narrow down this, or I want to put this, get a real understanding, negotiate union contracts. What you're saying is, they're going to do it together, but the first select person could say, hey, I'm doing this, hit the road.
No, if you're putting it in that context, okay, then I would say leave it with the CAO, who then will present it to the Board of Selectmen, okay? The first selectman, if they really don't agree with it, then they're going to make their position known at some point during those negotiations.
Because if I'm the labor negotiating body, and I know, and I'm going to negotiate a contract with a CAO, but that CAO can have that all undone or disagree with by the first select person, game over. Why would I ever negotiate? I got to negotiate with the man, as they call it, with the person who can run the show.
Well, that's good in business, okay? But in town, now wait a minute, I'm going to go back to how I think the Board of Education negotiates some of their contracts. Okay, they're committees, they're appointed members from the board, they work with the unions, okay? Then they present it to the Board of Education. All right? Now, I'm not sure, Lydia, you could comment on how much input the superintendent has on those contracts. But I'll turn that over to you.
Yeah, we do. We have in the Board of Education, we have a personnel negotiation committee. And I've served on that several times, and Mike Goldman is the chair of the committee now. So they are, it is a standing committee of the Board of Education, and they work with Burke Leclerc, who is our business manager, with also our attorney, Tom Mooney, when we are negotiating the contracts. But our superintendent also has a say in this. So it is, all the work is really done within the committee, within that personnel negotiation committee, with central office staff, and then presented to the full board at such time that the full board will look at the negotiated contract.
Does your chairman of the board have veto power?
No. No, chairman does not have veto power.
Right.
The full board does, I would assume.
The full board
The
does.
full board
right,
does,
right.
once
So-
presented to the full
Right,
board, once
right,
it comes
right.
out of committee, because everything is done within committee with central office administrations. Once it is completely completed and presented to full board at a subsequent meeting, and full board has the opportunity to ask the questions to the committee, then the decision is made after that.
Right.
This
And
is an
one final
expectation.
thing is, then it goes from the Board of Ed to the Board of Selectmen. So you've got different levels of
Right, so it
process.
does, once it's completed within a Board of Education function, it goes right on to the Board of Selectmen.
So there's an expectation that at least theoretically, the labor union could negotiate with the committee it could be rejected by the BOE, it could be rejected by the BOS. They understand that they may have to go
Absolutely.
back to the drawing table.
Oh, absolutely. It could come
Practically
right.
speaking, does that ever happen?
But it's
Has it
boards.
happened?
Yeah.
No, it has
Okay.
not in my term.
But theoretically, it
has
could.
that happened. But theoretically, it
Okay.
could, should it not be approved by the Board of Ed, the full board after committee,
Okay.
and then going on to Board of Selectmen. It could have one chance to not be approved. It could have two chances not to.
So Tom, you're saying,
Reducing the committee to the CAO essentially.
right, so,
Giving the CAO what the
Right.
plan, what the committee does.
and I think that's what you're suggesting, Tom, correct?
I'm just trying to identify what the first select person is going to have power over. That's what I want to know. And when I start seeing things like negotiate union contracts, that's where the hairs go out on the top of my neck, because I don't want somebody who, maybe retired from the hardware store saying, I'm going to negotiate the labor contracts. That's just a
I
flat-out
don't disagree.
disaster.
And if you think it belongs there,
So you want the
I'm okay with
CAO
that
to do
too.
that?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. We want the CAO.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let
That's
it
what I
follow the
said.
board, but not the CA, but not the CEO.
And then goes to the line.
All right, so Paul said town policy, no for the
would be a
CAO, yes
no.
for the first select person. Initiates ordinances, no for the
Correct.
CAO, yes for first selectman. Represents town at regional organizations, yes, as the agent, and the first selectman, yes.
Right. This first selectman is typically the person who represents the town, but there could be instances where the first selectman would say, I want you to go. Initiate contracts,
Yes for the CAO, and yes under the hybrid model for first selectman? They both can do it? Is that how this reads, Bob?
Yes, but under what is displayed in the matrix, the signing, execution of the contract is left with the first selectman, but there's no magic to that. You could have the CAO authorized to sign contracts.
So under the hybrid, though, can the first select person, unbeknownst to the CAO, go initiate a contract on behalf of the town?
Yes.
Think that's a good idea?
well, I want to throw that
Think
out.
that's a good
Wouldn't-
idea?
Mary and Anita, to initiate a contract, wouldn't the first selectman currently have to bring something to the Board of Selectmen? Is there a
No,
threshold?
Always no.
no. As long as the funding's approved in a line item by the Board of Finance. The first selectman right now can go out and hire a consultant, as long as there's a line item called consulting fees, that there's money there. I think the issue of contract, though, today, under the purchasing ordinance, either the first selectman or the finance director can sign a contract. Initiating a contract means, hey, I think we ought to go out and buy new copy machines. And under the matrix, the CAO can do that, but the first selectman, you're looking for a check and a balance, this first selectman would have to sign that contract after the procurement process has been completed. Again, it doesn't have to be that.
So they could initiate the contract, but the signing of the contract would either be with the first selectman or
Today it's with the,
signature.
yes, today it's with the first selectman or the director of finance, but, who goes out and gets the bids for the project? The new phone system or those are large contracts, but, any number of things you can think of, or we need a new piece of equipment in the Parks Department. So you go out and get a bid, or you solicit bids. Usually that stuff comes through the department heads, and the department head says, hey, look, that dump truck is really not in good shape. We've got money in the budget. Can we go out to bid? Today, the first selectman says, yeah, let's go out to bid. I agree with you. It's long overdue.
Let me Google that. I'll figure out what the best deal is.
Right. Are these some things that should be in the job description or by ordinance versus charter?
It absolutely could be. I mean, I think you have to be clear in the charter who does what, but how those functions get performed is probably better left to a job description or an ordinance, because again, over time, things change. I mean, you want to clearly identify, for instance, who disciplines employees, who promotes employees, who is the appointing authority, who has the final say on the, the PAF form that the first selectman signs. You can't hire an employee until the first selectman signs that PAF form. That's what initiates the employment agreement. You want to be clear as who does that.
Yeah, I mean, what's your impression if your CAO comes and says, if I don't get rid of Susie, she's a cancer. She is a cancer, and we're losing employees because of Susie. Am I okay to fire this person? No. Go back to work. That's a disaster to me. That is a disaster.
If you want to fire Susie, even if the first selectman wants to fire Susie or Ben, you still have to go through the disciplinary process.
But if the first select person says no, the CAO goes down in the hallway, closes the door, and starts screaming, and puts his
But
resume
Tom, we
out.
already talked about discipline of employees and said yes under the CAO.
All right, so
What if let's flip it around. What if
Point
that
director is the
person
CAO.
says, I want to fire Ben because Ben keeps taking my parking spot and I want to fire him? You got to go through some process, right?
So do you want the first select person to be able to veto that on the Ben's parking spot issue?
I think you need to have a very good understanding of what the job description is from the standpoint of following what the laws are with respect to that. We already talked about discipline of employees under the CAO, okay? And if the CAO starts firing people and the first selectman says, wait a minute, you're creating some real exposures to us, then I think that's an issue that has to be brought to not only to that person's attention, but to the Board of Selectmen as well.
So if I could just recap. Appoints directors, CAO, yes. Prepares town budget for submission, yes. Discipline of employees, yes. Promotion of employees, yes. Negotiates union contracts, said yes. Sets down policy, no. Initiates ordinances, we didn't clarify that?
No.
That's no. Represents town or regional organizations,
Yes, isn't it?
yes, as agents. Initiates contracts, we said yes.
Sounds like a town manager.
Thank you.
So,
It's
Great minds think alike.
There are some differences,
like a duck,
though. There are
walks
some
like a duck.
differences, though, in that this person reports to the first selectman. Okay? And you
For what?
still have
For
the
what? What do they report
Because you
to?
have accountability, and we've looked at so many different ways of government, okay? And there's no consistent one. You got town manager over here, you got first selectman over here, you got like Greenwich, where you got a first selectman and you've got a chief administrative officer who make probably the equivalent of salaries, okay? So it's, again, I fall back to what are the things that we need to make a change for? What were some of the issues? And also, what are the things that work in the town? And why are we going to turn things around from a form of government that we've had for years? Why would we do that? But are there changes that we can make that will improve the process? That's why I'm throwing it out there.
Anita, you had something?
Yeah, a couple of months ago, I expressed the very same sentiment that Paul just had, that it's, why can't we, instead of going from one extreme to the other, why can't we find something in the middle? But I took very, very seriously the recommendation that we got from the mayor of West Hartford when he was here. He said, pick one or the other. And I think the difficulty of the discussion that we're having right now is indicative of problems that we're going to have down the road if we go with the hybrid. And I have to say that this is after a long deliberation on my part and thinking a lot about the experiences I've had in various roles in town government, that I really think that we should try the town manager and go with it and give the persons a clear mandate and not fudge around the edges and say, you can do this, but not this way, but not that way, and erode the power that this person should have in order to do the job right. And if he or she can't do the job right, throw him out and find somebody else.
Question?
Sure.
One of the things that we discussed several meetings ago, one of the recommendations of the Economic Development Task Force was for the transfer of the economic development function from the Economic Development Commission to the first selectman. So if we were to codify, whether in the charter or what have
They
you.
didn't say that. They said first selectman or town manager or whoever is
okay.
in that office.
But
they didn't specify only first selectman.
Okay, but let me continue with this train of thought. So if we were to indeed codify and protect those liability-inducing portions of the role that have us all concerned about having somebody who knows how to negotiate union contracts, who knows how to be a personnel director, if we were to protect Simsbury's liability by protecting those positions so they can't be done away with on a whim, can we retain that which we all value about our first selectman form of government by the voter involvement and the constituency involvement and the community involvement that we get from a first selectman form of government by having the economic development portion, which we all know Simsbury could we could use a little more economic development. Anybody can, right? So if this were to become more of a full, more of a role of the first selectman, as separate and apart from personnel director, imbuing the first selectman with a role in that they haven't had before, do we then come to a form of hybrid government where we have the protection that we need, that we might get from a town manager form of government, and also the connection to the community and the voters and all the involvement that we get by us all being involved in our form of town government? That's a question I throw out there to you. What do you think of that?
You can accomplish that if you dream up something for the first select person to do.
Okay.
You'd have to dream it up. You'd have to justify why they're on a payroll and what they're going to do. Whereas if you go to town manager, the role of the mayor is the policy driver. The role of the town council is the policy drivers. They set policy, they look at vision, they drive that bus, and they go down the hallway to the town manager and said, can we do this? Can you plan that we can afford to do this? And then that's how it works.
Find a way to make this work.
But, we're struggling with the hybrid because in our guts, in everybody's gut sitting here, you're like, how's that going to work? How's that possibly going to work? We want to hire somebody, we're going to tell them, you get to run the whole town of Simsbury. But they're not, because they're going to be running it with their hands tied behind their back. So it's one or the other as far as I'm concerned. I think it would be a disaster to try and find somewhere for the first select person to fit. I know where they fit. Run for first selectman, win, be the policy driver, keep your full-time job. So now we've included people who are excluded from running because they need to have their job. All right. Right now you have a $70,000 job. I don't know how many dynamic people you're going to get, and that's not a comment on the person that's in the job right now. All I'm saying is somebody you need who has 3 kids in college probably isn't going to give up their job to take that job. But they might be an incredible emissary for the town, an incredibly visionary person who can come in after their full-time job and sit at the Board of Selectmen meeting and have some great, powerful ideas. But if they have the minutia of running the town, or they have to pretend they're running the town by getting reports that they either say, of course I trust you, you're a professional, or let me see a way I can finally justify what I'm doing here. Does this make sense to you? Does road bond? What is a road bond, by the way? I can't imagine how frustrated that would be if that's what I do for a living and I got somebody asking me those questions. So,
But any of these scenarios, the current form, you're always going to have somebody that's going to be at the top, right? And you're always going to have somebody that's. I'm trying to get at your scenario that the first selectman or mayor, whoever, could veto what the town manager or CAO is trying to do. But going to the town manager, that's completely reversed, right? You could have the first selectman coming to the CAO, first selectman elected, board of selectmen elected, trying to do the will of the people. So you have a policy that's set. He or she could come to the town manager, to use your example, can we do this? Town manager, hypothetically, again, an unelected official, unelected person, is laid out here, essentially, for life. They could say no. So, I mean, my point being, the reverse can happen, too, in the town manager world. In any of any of these scenarios, that can happen.
But if you're picking someone who's a competent person, if you botch that, you just made the point that you're not good enough to run the town if you can't pick a good town manager. If you pick the person, like Van Winkle from West Hartford, okay? If Scott came into his office and said, we want to put these roadways and these signage and these lamps and this and that, and his CAO or his town manager says, sure, find me $50 million of additional revenue, you could do this all day long. That's their job, is to bring the reality to the situation. And then the first selectman goes back to the board and says, talk to the town manager, we'll never have the money of that, or we got to find a way to raise the money for that. So I think that's how I see that all working.
See how that
Mary, you had this look.
I just wondered, no, I won't say.
Okay. Paul? Mary's deferring.
I'm deferring.
That's the first time that's ever happened.
Damn straight.
I mean, those are all interesting arguments, Tom. You're an attorney. I can't compete with that. I'm just a lowly insurance guy. So
you could probably afford to take the first selectman's job. I can't.
Again, it goes back to accountability, okay? And where do you want the accountability for the town to rest? Do you want it to rest with a town manager who has to keep 4 out of 6 people happy? And I understand. I respected what West Hartford did. It's a much bigger town. Or do you want it in somebody who's elected by the voters? Now, if the voters decide they want to elect somebody who is totally incompetent, then you get the government you voted for.
In 2016, that would never happen.
I'm talking Simsbury here now.
But if you got a town manager sitting there, it's not going to have that big an impact.
And again, what Mrs. Shanks said, okay, is that the federal government's in chaos. The state of Connecticut is in chaos. I disagree that the town of Simsbury is in chaos, okay? We don't have a revolving door at Town Hall. We've had some positions that have changed over. We have not had a revolving door at the Cultural Parks and Rec, the town clerk, the town assessor. The town engineer was here forever. He retired. You got to deal with that, okay? So, again, those are the things that I look to and say, okay, do I want to turn this upside down? And, I think everybody here, again, I've said this before, everybody here, their intentions are to do the right thing. And I looked at this and I said, I think this is the right thing to do. If we miss the mark, we're going to have another Charter Revision Commission in 5 years. And maybe we won't. If we do the ordinances right and you need to change it, you change it by ordinance. You don't have to go through all of what we're going through right now. The other final thing is, we haven't even talked about, okay, if we adopt this is the first step. Then the next step is, what are the duties of the first selectman? Okay? Then you can go and, make those as well, so.
Upside down to me means that. If we go to town manager, all we're doing is going like that. Because we're almost there.
It's your view.
I think we are. We've professionalized the town staff. All we haven't done is put the name and the title on the person. So it's not this, it's that, in my view, anyway. And accountability, it's a great segue for what my next comment is, which is, let's give the voters of the town of Simsbury the ability to vote on whether this town should have a town manager or not. Because in the end, we can recommend it, the Board of Selectmen can say yes, but it's going to go to the voters. And let them decide. But for us to take away that opportunity, that vote, I think is dead wrong when we're here for the second time in 3 years talking about the same thing, and look how tortured this is when we start talking about negotiate contracts. Well, I would like the first selectman to do that, but that doesn't make any sense. And we go down the whole list, there's nothing for that person to do. Nothing other than to get in the way and let them be a policy driver.
Well, again, I don't necessarily agree with that. What you're trying to do here is define a job description when we're trying to look at how do you make adjustments in the charter. And you can do that with respect to, do the town of Simsbury residents want to vote on this? I haven't heard a whole lot. I haven't heard a whole lot about it.
I bet you they assume
I'm not
we're
getting
run by
letters.
professionals.
And in a way, we are. In a way, we are.
I don't think they would ever believe that our
we
first
have built
selectman
a pretty
can
good
do the things that that person
professional staff. So, anyway.
I just wondered if Dr. Rinaldi would like to call the question.
He can't, but you can do that. You can do that.
We've been working on this matrix. We've gone through it. There's 11 items here. I would just say that before we take a vote, let's identify how many items out of the 11 differ between columns 2 and 3.
Okay.
Right?
One.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Sorry?
What are you asking at? What?
Well, you've got column 2, town manager, column 3, hybrid. So I want to, there's 11 criteria there. Of the 11 criteria, where is there the difference between the two columns? How many out of 11? I mean, I could do it in my head, but I think we should do it as a group and just know it, yeah.
There's one that's very
One.
confusing to me.
Say one, is it more than one? Yeah.
Under the represents town at regional organizations, it says yes as the agent of the CEO, yet up at the top of the next column, the first selectman is not the CEO.
No.
I don't understand this.
That fourth column, it was a lot simpler chart with 3 columns. That fourth column doesn't relate to the column next to it.
Right.
I didn't even look at them. Just
So we
cross
can
those out.
I think you
technically
can eliminate
cross out
the
fourth
fourth
column.
column.
Oh, just eliminate.
Yeah, that's,
I thought
yeah,
that-
don't even look at
It
that.
was an illustration of what's left for the first selectman to do if you choose town manager or if you choose hybrid. It maybe should have been 5 columns instead of 4, but maybe it should just be 3.
Less is more.
It boils down to this, and we've got first selectman in the room, so you know this. Who hires and fires? Who prepares the budget to submit to the Board of Selectmen? Who signs contracts? Is it any more complicated than that, really? I mean, as first
You just have to
selectman,
pick whether that person holds a master's in public administration or ran a damn good hardware store, right?
well, in very large municipal organizations, you have lots of people with master's degrees working in subsidiary roles to the, in relatively small organizations like this, you're not going to have, 4 assistants to the first selectman like you would have, 4 assistants to a mayor of a large city or whatever. But, town manager, to be a true town manager, has to have everything identified in column 2, or you're not going to get anybody. Or if you do, you're going to get somebody building a resume to move on where they do have full power. And to have a true first selectman, you've got to stick with column 1. The hybrid is an attempt to really codify what you have right now, which is you have a very good group of professional people performing the functions of government, subject to the final decision-making of the first selectman. And that's sort of grown over time.
Mary?
So here's where my confusion is. I thought our discussion tonight was going to be, are we looking at the hybrid model like Canton or town manager? The Canton conversation that we saw earlier says that the first selectman remains the chief executive officer, but then the chief administrative officer is listed with powers, and they include duties such as administration, personnel, execution of laws, records and accounts. So that's what I thought we were talking about tonight. So I don't know if folks, this would be helpful, this, to refresh ourselves, because it gets, I think that the motion on the table is very confusing to me. I can't vote on it because I don't think it goes, I think it's worse than what we have now, because it's at the pleasure of the first selectman. So in my mind, I thought we were starting from the chief administrative officer position as is outlined in Canton, which is very specific and avoid some of those problems, or going to a full-time manager. So I just throw that out for discussion.
Not to complicate things more, but that's the January 21st draft.
Right.
It's almost verbatim from
Right.
the Canton Charter,
Right.
adapting to the
Right.
Simsbury situation.
Right.
It leaves the first selectman as the chief executive. It's almost, it's essentially the
Yeah,
Canton.
and that's why, that's why this motion confused me, because I wasn't, I thought we were looking back more towards the chief administrative officer as outlined in the Canton model.
I could amend my motion to take out that at pleasure if you'd like.
I wouldn't save that.
Well, what you've described, may I see this?
Yes, you may have.
Okay, what was the page you were looking at, as far as duties?
Duties. It's right here.
No, I think it was the next one.
Well-
Yeah, right. Starts here.
Oh, here, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Okay.
Chief
Are a lot-
Administrative Officer.
Okay, are a lot of these things which would be either by ordinance or in job description? It says duties, wouldn't those be in a job description?
I don't think so. I think
where instead
under,
it's putting it into the charter?
no, I think it gets back to Tom's point,
Have to, it's one or the other.
that if we go with
Just human
a
nature.
full town manager position, I think you can do a job description, because you're removing all the duties. You're giving all the chief administrative duties to the town manager, so you could do a job description. I think where you go to a hybrid, I think it's more important that the duties of the chief administrative officer be spelled out.
So do you consider Canton to be a hybrid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the first selectman is still pays, still sets policy, still has a role.
It's a stipend pay.
Stipend, it's like
It's a very
$5,000.
small stipend pay
Yeah.
compared to.
The January
Yeah, it's very
21st draft
part-time.
is
It's a
intended to...
part-time,
Yeah, I think they paid like 35,000.
no.
No, 5, he
No,
said
she's five,
5.
about 5,000, and it's about 2 days a week.
15?
Okay. So, I mean, I'm not saying we should adopt the Canton
Right, it's a
model
very
exactly.
small
but I-
hybrid model that they've chosen to do
Also
that.
smaller towns.
But if,
Yes, it is.
But I'm, getting back to Anita's point, if folks feel this is too confusing, I think we should go back to either the first selectman runs the show or the town manager runs the show.
Should we vote?
Anybody else? Okay, so we'll vote on that motion. Okay, with the second by Jeff. All those in favor signify by raising your
Can I
hand.
just get clarity again?
Right, what's
Is
that?
this motion Paul's initial motion?
Paul's
Because
initial
It's
motion.
the motion on the table.
Right. All those in favor signify by, right. Another question?
We're voting on this specific language, not just the theory of a hybrid, and let's hammer out the details.
You have to vote on
Right.
this.
First we have to vote on this, then this can be rejected and brought back in another form. Okay?
Right. To Mary's point, though, I will amend the motion, assuming it doesn't withdraw the motion from the table, to strike the words, "at the pleasure of the first selectman."
That's in paragraph 1,
That's in
correct?
paragraph 1.
Okay.
Or it should say, "and shall serve at the pleasure of the first selectman." That makes it more inconsistent with the first sentence under section 704, town officers.
Okay. Do we have a second on that?
We have to,
Okay.
because the second.
Okay, we have a second.
Jeff was second.
Jeff
agreed,
second. Do we need any discussion on that particular item, or are we just going to, if not, we can go back to the original motion with the amendment?
I will ask one
Right,
question.
sure.
So just by way of clarification, that brings it more in line with the Canton.
No.
No,
that
it brings it more in line with,
Like a town
Mary's
clerk.
objection was that it serves at the pleasure of the first
So,
selectman.
okay.
So removing.
Okay,
Right. Makes it more like the town clerk.
okay.
You'll end up going back to 704 as modified in your memo, which, spells out the chief administrator officer serves for an indefinite term, et cetera, et cetera. That's what you'll end up going back to.
I just want to be clear, the Canton model is the January 21st, 2016 draft. That
what I
was
thought.
That was the attempt to take the Canton model, put it in the Simsbury
Okay.
charter.
Okay, is there any discussion on the amendment to the original motion? No? So I just need a show of hands to make sure we approve it. All those in favor of the amendment to the original motion?
We're talking about the
The
amendment?
amendment to the
Amendment.
original
Oh,
motion.
yeah, okay,
because
I'll
we have to
vote for
change
that.
that first. So
Favor of the amendment.
Wait, amendment.
Amendment to the
this
original
is in
motion.
favor of the amendment
Take
to
out
the
the-
original motion, to take out that language. This has no impact on your vote
Oh,
for the full,
very
for
good,
the
okay,
original.
yes.
This is just to change it to that.
Yes.
All those in favor of the amendment?
Yes.
Mary, Paul?
Wait, what did
yeah.
you just say? Sorry, we
Okay,
were
this is,
This is the
we're
amendment.
voting on
This
the...
is just on the amendment?
We're just voting on the amendment
Fine,
to your
fine.
original motion.
Right.
Don't
Nothing
vote
else.
against it
All
now.
those in favor, please signify by raising your hand.
Yeah.
All those opposed? Okay.
Oh, one.
Okay.
Post Tom.
So, yeah, Tom was opposed, everybody else in favor. Okay, so that is now part of the motion. Now, any further discussion, or do we want to vote on the original motion?
As amended.
As amended. Okay, all those in favor signify by raising your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it goes down 4 to 7. Okay,
Can Tanya list the names?
Against?
yeah.
So four
Okay,
is-
let's do the opposed, the 4 is easier, there's only 4 of us.
Oh,
And
No,
Paul.
no,
Oh, wait.
And Paul.
I mean, if you want to put
You-
it,
Usually you support your own.
Yeah.
Usually- no,
Well, I've seen it happen
I've
where
seen it the
people
other way
don't.
too. I've seen it the other way too.
Hallie, Paul,
Lydia,
Jeff.
Jeff, okay, got it? Everybody else opposed, okay. Yes,
May I make a motion?
you certainly may.
I move that this board recommend to the Board of Selectmen that we adopt a town manager form of government.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a second from Ed. Let me just get that. Okay, 1 second. Okay, discussion, Mary.
question for the proponent of the motion.
Yes.
What do you see the role of the first selectman if that's under your proposal?
Chief policy driver on the Board of Selectmen.
And it would be up to the board of selectmen to determine whether it's paid or not paid, or,
I would urge the board to recommend that it be an unpaid position.
and just questioning whether we'd get people to run, because it is a lot of time.
It won't be, because they're going to be basically, other than covering things for the town, they'll be running the town meeting, and you have the other people sitting next to you who are unpaid, doing those meetings. So I'm not adverse to some stipend, but, I don't think it needs to be a paid position.
Thank you.
But that's not part of the motion.
Not part of the motion.
Lydia?
Okay, thank you.
Now, do you envision this, because this is something that also have, been batted around in my head, and we are not here to, discuss the merits of pay or not, because that is not our charge in here, but is it a part-time, is it several days a week, is it a full-time, where, this is something, it's not, I know, it's
It wouldn't be in the
it's not
charter, but I would
charter, but-
envision that if the person wants to run for first selectman or selectwoman, that they're doing it for a specific reason, and that is to be the liaison between the community and the board. And they'll set their own hours, and that's how they'll run. That's how they'll run. So the electorate is pretty smart in this town. If somebody says nothing about office hours or keeping an office at town hall or doing anything that, they're not going to get elected. But if a person says, I'm excited about the job, I want to do this, I'm going to be available to the townspeople, I want to have an office, that will all be fleshed out in how they want to run his or her campaign.
Anyone else? That was quick. What?
I'll get back to the discussion I had, and some of the cons that came from you. You sent something that said town manager, and you listed a bunch of pros, and then the cons. Unfortunately, I don't have the full list in front of you. You do have that, okay? That would be great, thank you. I was hoping you'd
Disregard all those things I said
should have said to you, why don't you read the cons?
With a footnote.
Okay. The cons for a town manager. Contract termination costs. If the Board of Selectmen or Town Council makes bad town manager hiring selection. Community may lose the personal connection with the day-to-day first selectman. Residents won't have the right to vote in or vote out the person who runs the town. Lack of accountability to the public, which I think speaks to the issue that the town manager ends up building their own power base. Potential impact of shrinking pool of quality town manager applicants as a result of some towns reverting back to a non-town manager form of government, thereby chilling the attractiveness of the town manager career choice, which I think we did hear.
Scott said that.
Scott, and also I think we heard that from one other speaker, but I can't say that for certain. Simsbury has a good working model now in the first select person / director of administrative services, the best of both worlds. Visionary leaders have accomplished many things over the years for the town, and the town hasn't seemed to have been hampered by the lack of a town manager. No public outcry for a town manager. Town manager will still not eliminate the politics of any town hall. Any town hall. Nobody was pointing at our town hall. So that's my only discussion point.
Okay. Anybody else? We're ready for a vote? We're voting on whether we're going to recommend to go to a full town manager form of government. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, let me just put your hands up again so I can get it. We got Mary, Anita, Lydia, Tom, Jim, Bob, and Ed. Do I have 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed? 4.
One clarification, Tom also said that the first selectman should not be a paid position.
Okay.
Well, that wasn't part
Yeah,
of
but that's not part of the motion.
That was not part of your motion?
That's not part
No,
of
I was
it.
just
No,
gonna
that's
make
not part of the
sure.
motion.
Response to a
That's just a
question.
response to a question. So it passes 7-4.
Who are the 4?
Bob? 1, 2, 3, 4.
I have a running draft of the charter, which I've kept. I haven't given it to you because it's, I didn't want to keep bringing 50-page documents with one minor change to it. It seems to me with this vote, Tom and I should put together the running draft with town manager and send it out to you, because town manager, once you go to town manager, there's lots of changes that have to happen in the charter to put that into the charter. So we'll prepare that draft for you for your next meeting.
Guess you can file that now.
Okay.
Question.
Mary? Sure.
Could we revisit just whether the first selectman or the board of selectmen would have a stipend? I just want to comment on that, because I think that it is expensive for the board of selectmen to be on the board of selectmen. You have to go to a lot of functions, you have to attend a lot of events. Some people are in a financial position where that's okay, but other people aren't. And I would hate to preclude finding good candidates who might wish to serve the town that can't. So I would suggest at some point we add comment as to whether there should be some payment for the first selectman to encourage people to run, or a stipend even for the board of selectmen members to cover their travel costs and certain things. Some towns give.
I think we need to give our views on what the first selectman's role is going to be, so we don't lose, like all the cons that were in the things, that we don't lose that. We don't want to lose the ability of that focus to the town.
I think that's
we
right.
need to cover the whole thing, not necessarily the stipend part.
So maybe we could put that on a future agenda, and maybe we could get some suggestions from staff as to where there's models of what the role of the first selectman would be under a town manager form of government. Because we don't have to say nothing. We don't have to say.
I think we should definitely, in our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, provide them the list of cons.
Yeah.
Because they have to have their second
Yes,
discussion.
no, I'm not saying
They're
you
more
shouldn't.
representative of the public than
Right.
we are. We're
But I think we
appointed.
should also give, because this would be effective with the next election of a first selectman, I think we have to spell out very clearly what the duties of the first selectman and the board of selectmen would be, so that people can choose to run for those. We want people to run for those offices. And we want to encourage, folks who maybe couldn't have given up their full-time job, because to run for your job every 2 years, not knowing whether your family has coverage and health care, and
Sure.
you limit your pool of people who are able to run. So I just
By the way, that's still on the table too, the 2 years part.
Yeah.
right,
We're
no,
gonna get
whatever,
back to
2
that,
or 4. But if so now that we've removed that, we've removed barriers for people to run because they no longer have to give up their day job. But I think it would be worthy of us all having a discussion as to how we can encourage people to run for that position, knowing we have someone professional in place protecting the town.
Bob, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, if the commission wants me to, I could, typically the stipend is phrased, the Board of Selectmen may, by ordinance, establish an appropriate stipend for the members of the Board of Selectmen. I could put that in the draft. If you like it, you leave it in. If you don't like it, you tell us to take it out.
So you were talking the first selectman and the board of selectmen.
I think so.
But I think
probably
you
the
need to
same
do it by
stipend.
ordinance
Or
because
minor
Sherry.
modifications, a couple $1,000s.
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I just thought we should discuss it, and maybe that would be a good prompt for us to discuss it if you put it in.
Anita?
I think especially for the first selectman, I don't know that the whole board of selectmen needs it, because the first selectman very often has to go to daytime meetings. You have to go down to the LOB, you have to lobby for the town for certain causes, and those things all happen during the work day. And the regular board of selectmen don't necessarily take
True.
part in any of that. They aren't necessarily the ones who are going to have a desk in this building. And people coming to see them about all their barking dogs and all the neighborhood kids who are screaming when they jump on the trampolines and have all of these other problems that we deal with. And I think I was shocked, really shocked, when I heard that Scott Slifka has never had any kind of a salary for what he does as mayor of West Hartford, because it's been a job.
Volunteer of the year.
And he hasn't gotten paid. And the town of West Hartford can well afford to remunerate people who are making such extraordinary contributions. And the town of Simsbury can too.
Good point. Good point.
Okay. Anybody else on this? No. Okay. So we're
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yeah.
Different
please.
subject, but because some of the public talked about Board of Ed issues, we've already,
We're going to address that.
we've already voted not to disturb or
Right.
make any recommendations, right?
Right.
When members of the public comment, I like to take into consideration what I've heard, and I just pose this rhetorical question, not for any answer, but imagine if the Board of Ed elections were open to anybody and there were no appointed by town committees. Imagine if that was the situation, and then it was announced that town committees decided, we're not going to do that anymore. We're actually just going to appoint 2 people each year for those 4 spots. Imagine what the public outcry would be that. So that's the way I flip it around, and you say, wow, no one would ever agree to undo free and open elections for an appointment process. So I get it, and it sticks in my craw. I'm not sure what the remedy is, but I hear it, and I wanted to let you know that, Bill.
Okay. Now, when,
Can I follow up on
Okay.
comments? I'm glad you brought it up, because I was going to bring it up as well. A couple of points that were made, the opening up the Board of Ed for unaffiliated, I think that was something that I think was important to all of us, but years ago, we did open up unaffiliated positions on a number of boards and commissions. You'll see now that there's a requirement that there be an unaffiliated representative on the Board of Ethics, and so there are places where we've tried to open up the process. I'm not really sure how to fix the problems that were raised, so I appreciate the concerns, but I don't know how to fix them, because I just don't see any solutions. I mean, I was thinking, coming here tonight, asking Bob, could you draft something that would address?
I think you add an extra
Issues.
seat. You add an extra seat is what sounded like to me was the best idea to break this logjam, because you're never going to have 2 town committees say, well, they might do, you do 3 one year and we'll do 3 the next year, you may, but
You have an odd number of seats and you rotate it differently with.
they can.
And there's nothing prohibiting the parties from running more candidates and having competition. So we can't,
It's a very difficult
yeah, okay.
situation.
So with that, I guess
Yeah, Melissa, I know, wanted to say something.
So, the unaffiliated representation on the Board of Education is a different issue than whether we have competitive elections within the Democratic and the Republican representation on the board. The way that the state statutes read, if you've got an 8-member board, you've got to have 4 and 4. That's the way the state statute reads about this. But that doesn't preclude.
I don't think it does.
It does. It does. It's 204A, I think. 9204A.
Contradictory, it says both things. If you read the whole.
204A and 204
Contradicted
sub
above.
A.
Yeah.
Well, just for clarification then on that point, Bob,
Minority
is there anything wrong with parties running more candidates
No,
and
there
having
is not.
minority representation? So you could
No,
have a
if
4-2
If
board.
8 people run for 4 seats.
No, the way, if you have an 8-member board, the way the state
12
statute
people run for
reads,
4 seats.
the minority representation is actually, it's not minority, it's equal representation under the state statutes. But that doesn't mean that the Democrats can't decide to run more Democrats than there are spots for Democrats. So you could still have an elected election amongst the Democrats and an elected election amongst the Republicans. However, speaking to the unaffiliated issue, all of that gets all that kind of gets put to the wayside if an unaffiliated person runs and wins. Then there's actually no state provision for that. I was looking at this. There kind of isn't a provision for the eventuality of an unaffiliated person running. So the issue of whether an unaffiliated person chooses to run, again, that's not, Simsbury can't control that.
Right,
It's state law that says how an affiliated person gets onto the ballot.
Correct.
So we've got apples and oranges here. You've got the issue of how do you get an unaffiliated person onto the board? Well, unless they petition on by state statute and get elected, there's nothing we can do in the state of in the town of Simsbury. The only way to ensure unaffiliated presence on a board is to make it an appointed board. And what I hear from people is that they actually want more participation in the elections, not that they want simply to be. And so I don't think that those are two things.
They're consistent.
It's a Hobson's choice there, you know.
I'm going to call a little halt to this for a minute. Okay, what we should do now is we need to have a discussion on upcoming items on the agenda. If, in fact, people want to readdress the board issue, be my guest, we can do that. I would suggest not. We already voted on it.
Twice.
Okay, yeah.
3 of us weren't, 3 or 4 of us weren't here
I
at
understand,
that time.
I understand that, I understand that. But the fact is, we can't craft the agenda depending on who's going to be there.
Be honest.
I mean, it's, that's just the way it goes.
And we had.
So if I have a majority of the board who wants to readdress it, or if somebody who was on the winning side wants to, reconsider it, I'm open to that. But other than that, I'm not going to, I don't feel we should bring it back. Not the way it's run.
I think
I got Tom first.
Well, I want to make it very clear, I'm not advocating bringing this back up for discussion.
Okay.
I just wanted to let the member of the public know that I get it.
Okay.
I get it.
And we did,
also
and we
said-
said that we would give in our report
We don't-
to the Board of Selectmen,
Right.
we put strong language in here saying that was a major issue
major
that,
issue
quite
with
frankly,
the public.
we're struggling with.
Okay.
But we wanted to recognize and acknowledge that the town is bringing this issue to us.
Okay, now, Bob and Tom, we've got a number of issues that we've got to get done fairly rapidly now, okay?
One meeting.
We'll put an agenda, I don't want to get the agenda out early next week, okay, so we have plenty of time to digest it. Among the things we're going to be talking about the next time are length of terms for the various, elected officials. Okay, there are a couple that we've discussed a little bit in the past. We want to also discuss, there were, I think, 3 committees that we wanted to address whether they should be, keep them, get rid of them, modify them. Tom, with the 3, I believe it was? Economic development, splitting off culture from Parks and Rec, and there was a 3rd, I believe.
Open space?
Open space was adding on.
That's a letter.
Yeah.
Got a letter on the open space.
Yeah,
That's new.
yeah. So I think we got 3 of those. So those will be starters for the next, and Tom, you and I will go over what else is left on the table, and we'll go from there. We might very well end up needing 1 or 2 special meetings, because I think the next meeting is actually our last regular scheduled meeting. Am I right on that?
17th.
Right.
That's correct.
So, March 17th. So if in fact we haven't gotten to everything by then, we're going to have to have a special meeting or 2 to wrap up everything.
Just a question maybe for Bob or you really. So, I mean, we just made a pretty dramatic change in the form of government, and then we haven't really talked about the implementation of that. One thing I did not hear from you is sort of next steps on town manager, how we get from A to B, and
We're
the rules.
going to draft you a town
Okay.
manager section of the
Okay.
charter and change everything that needs to be changed in the charter.
Yeah,
to
no, great. I
implement it.
just didn't want to.
Then we'll look at that, and once we
yeah.
look at that, we can.
Let me
make
go on a limb and
recommendations
say
to
we're going to
specifics
really
on
try to
that.
get you that by next week.
Yeah, I just in the list I didn't hear that stuff. So great, thank you. Thank you.
Point of clarification, though, to Tom's earlier comment.
Mm-hmm.
We just make a recommendation, this goes to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Selectmen, and if it's a change that has to go to ballot, right?
Yes.
Has to go to referendum.
Eventually.
Does not have to go to referendum. They can say thank you very much, and we reject the draft charter, and that's the end of it, unless someone petitions that to referendum, or they can say, great idea, let's put it on the ballot, or they can say, we like everything in here but this, this, and this, and send it back to you,
Okay.
in which case you can say, well, we meant what we said, we're not changing a word, and send it back, or you can say, we take your comments and make changes. So, in terms of steps, though, once you get a proposed draft charter, you have to have a public hearing on that before you send it to the Board of Selectmen. It's a public hearing on your report and the proposed draft charter. Public hearing concludes, you could have a meeting right after the public hearing, if you choose to address what you heard at the public hearing, or you can have it thereafter, but that's when you send it to the town clerk and transmit it to the Board of Selectmen. And then they have to take it up within X number of days.
So we're a long ways away from implementation.
Yep.
But we're getting there, slowly
Are you
but
trying
surely.
to put the
we're
for
getting
sale sign on your house?
there. Okay, anybody else on the commission have anything now? Then we'll go back, we have another public audience, okay? Please.
Oh, let me get out of the way here.
He's never confused selling with installing, right?
Ready? Carl Meyer, 7 Deepwood Road. Now, I've been under the weather all week, so my prepared remarks are kind of messy. So I might take 6 minutes instead of 5. First of all, Hadley, you've done the right thing in having 2 public audiences. Democracy's not easy. People coming here and yelling at you sometimes not easy, but it's absolutely the right thing, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And just for clarification, you weren't here in the very beginning. Until the last meeting, I was actually unaware of the fact that you could have 2 public audiences at the meeting.
Yes.
I didn't think you could do that, which is why I hadn't offered it beforehand.
Okay.
Once I found out you could, of course.
Okay, awesome. And thank you, Lydia, for setting the example all these years.
Thank you very much.
I'm here to talk about the Board of Ed, as you all know, but a few quick things. West Hartford has a town manager. I mean, West Hartford really got onto the map in the last couple of decades. We found Simsbury by finding West Hartford. I was here for their presentation, and I didn't find one flaw in it. So I think you've done the right thing tonight. As far as the stipend, before I lived here, I lived in Florida, and you hate to use Florida as an example of anything, but for people on boards like Board of Selectmen, Board of Ed, they had a $200 stipend per meeting. These are good people making a lot of money in their day job, and with average of 3 kids at home. They should be compensated somewhat for their time. So I think that would go for the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed as well.
I vote for that.
On charter revision.
I think you have to recuse yourself on that.
I didn't make a motion. We'll have to wait for Paul to come back.
We'll second that vote.
Am I running yet?
That's all on that. Melissa asked a question. I was watching the public audience before of Bill Gallagher and about the unaffiliateds. And I think I might be able to start to answer that question. First, I want to interject, though. The first vote, I'm not even sure there was one, to put this to bed. If there was one, it was based on false information that there was not any Board of Ed member serving longer than 8 years. It's on video. I don't know if there's Robert's Rules or the United States of America law that says you can't have a vote based upon an inaccuracy. I'm sure there is. Secondly, the second vote, which sort of was taken, I've watched every meeting, or I've been here for every meeting. But there were key players not here. Melissa wasn't here. Mary wasn't here. Anita wasn't here. I mean, that's 20 years of first selectman. Tom, you say you've heard, I mean, I agree with most things you say at these meetings, but you say you hear us. Well, then really, put your words into action. Really hear us and take it up. Especially, I think the biggest argument is there were 3 important people not here for the vote. Put it on the agenda again. Discuss it one more time. Have everyone here. If it gets voted down like town manager was voted up or down, then okay. But let's have it be fair and right. We all know what's right. I took a look at, and this starts to answer Melissa's question about research. I didn't research unaffiliateds on boards, but I looked at the top 30 school districts in Connecticut, of which, of course, we are one. We're in the top 10. Most of them have 9 members. Some of them have 7. Even the ones that have an even number, they have a majority and a minority. Or they have 3 Republicans running for 2 spots and 3 Democrats running for those 2 spots. So pretty much you look at the top 30 towns and there's competition. And there's not a lot of political infighting. People know that they're neighbors. Even the Board of Selectmen elections here, they get a little heated at times, but nothing like the federal government, the presidency. I'd give 2 examples, in a good way. Sean Askham and Lisa Hevner probably on opposite sides of the fence. Argued a little bit during the election, but you see them work together now. It's beautiful. They disagree in the most polite way. So I don't think we have anything to worry about. We're not going to turn it to Florida or Texas or Chicago or Los Angeles. It's just not, it's never happened here. Summit, New Jersey. Okay, let me back up a minute. Not all towns elect their Board of Ed. Some are appointed. The one thing that I found out in this research is if they are appointed, they're appointed by the mayor or the city council in a public meeting where it's discussed, it's on TV, Robert's Rules of Order. Summit, New Jersey in 1988, and Summit has an outstanding town. They're comparable to Fairfield, comparable to us. They had a big to-do about this in 88, voting whether they wanted appointed or elected. I think they voted for appointed, pretty sure, but it was appointed by the mayor and the town council. Interviews, discussions were had in public, not, in a private meeting with meeting minutes that are not available to the general public. We don't know if it was majority or minority. We don't know if it was a vote of 24 to 22. We don't know anything. People just show up. Hi, I'm on the board. And maybe that's a little bit of exaggeration, but not much. As far as where would we go, what would we do? Because that's the biggest thing. Change doesn't come easy to anyone. People in Simsbury don't like change that much. Most people don't. It's scary. But, and this hasn't, I can put this in writing, it hasn't been thought through every step. It's just, a stab at it. You said you might ask the attorney to take a stab at what would we do, You could add an unaffiliated right now. You could have the Board of Selectmen. Oh, no, okay, let me back up. I told you this wasn't typed. So, if we were to still want an appointed board, the Board of Selectmen could appoint the members of the Board of Ed. They are elected. So our elected representatives are now appointing our Board of Ed. The people have had a say. Just like you vote for the mayor of New York City, and mayor does a whole bunch of stuff. You've had your say. You voted for the mayor. You voted for the city council. So the people of Simsbury vote for the Board of Selectmen. That works for us. We're happy with that. We like most of our selectmen. We think they do a pretty good job. And if they were to appoint our Board of Ed, then that includes the voter. So if you were to transition from one to the other, and this is the thing I'd have to think through,
But you can have the Board of Selectmen add an unaffiliated right now. That'd be a 9th member, hardly be earth-shattering, you know. And then the next 2 people who either step down or are asked to step down after any number of years, or I don't know. You could grandfather them all, you know. I'm only interested in democracy moving forward. The next 2 are also U's. So then you have a board of 3 U's, 3 R's, 3 D's. And then every time you lose one of those, the Board of Selectmen appoints someone else. If a D steps down, they appoint a D. If an R steps down, they appoint an R. They have interviews, you know, either by committee or right during the Board of Selectmen meeting. It's a public process that the public can view. So that's the only thing I'd have to think through, you know, and that's not a Frankenstein board, or that's not, you know, reinventing the wheel only for Simsbury, because all of Connecticut, or 80% of Connecticut, has 9 members on their Board of Ed, including most of our peers and the ones who do even better than us: Westport, Weston, West Hartford, Ridgefield, New Canaan, Madison, Glastonbury, Farmington, Darien, Avon, Monroe, Salem, Chester, Guilford, all have 9. Most of the others here have 7. There's only 1 6, 2 8s, including us, and 1 10. But even the 10 has 6 and 4. 6 of one party, 4 of the other. So mostly I ask you to get it back on the agenda now that you have more information, accurate, truthful information, and it deserves a full airing with 20 years of first selectman here, and someone who eventually will be our state senator.
Not in 2016.
And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anybody else?
Can I ask a question, Carl?
Yeah, question,
Carl,
call, please,
just
before
one
you say.
question. Of the boards that are 9, do you know if any of them have views on them right now?
No, that's what I don't know.
I'd be interested, just,
It is a separate issue, but it's so related, you know?
I'm just curious.
Yeah. I didn't do any U research, no.
Okay.
Bill will do that. We'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
Ms. Coe?
First of all, I would like to thank the 8 people that voted for town manager. I've been working on this for 30 years. I know government doesn't work that fast. But anyway, I do thank you. I think that it's the best thing for Simsbury, and I think that professional management is what we all eventually should want. Also, as far as the Board of Education goes, and all the other extraneous issues that you have, I think if you go with a town manager as your charter, I think that if you put more things into it, you will never really understand what the vote of the public is, because if somebody wants, and the Board of Education has always been on the radar as something that was always an election that really didn't happen. It was an automatic, and a lot of people are very upset about that. I don't know how to fix it, but I know that this has been discussion for many, many years. But I think if you start nibbling away and putting a lot of issues, you'll get people who don't want something, and it has nothing to do with town manager, or they do want, I think because we're making a really major, and I thank you for your courage to do it, because I think it's definitely necessary. But if you're going to go to a complete change in the government, I don't think you should muddy it up for people who want to vote this up or down. I think you ought to leave the rest for another charter revision or something, but not muddy up make it pure. People, yes, I want to vote for a town manager. No, I don't. Because you'll never really know what the people want. If they vote it down, they could vote it down because they don't like some little thing that you put in it that is not appropriate for them. So I would urge you to just leave it clean. You've got a lot of work because you're changing an entire charter with all of the things. And I think keep it clean, send it forward, and another day we can take care of the issues that are ancillary to this particular position. So I thank you very much. My 100 votes were worth it. And,
Does that mean you won't be here next time?
I may run, I may not. It depends on whether it goes through. I may go for 100 too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Rinaldi, Mr. Gallagher's first. Mr. Gallagher is before you.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to follow up. Carl pretty much stole my thunder there with his comments, but I think the thought of going to a 9-person appointed Board of Education sounds like it could be a good idea. I like the idea of 3, 3, and 3, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, 3 unaffiliateds. I think a way to possibly get there, how to do that, I think this commission could be a model of how that works. If I understand it correctly, 4 members of this commission were appointed by the Democratic Town Committee, 4 were appointed by the Republican Town Committee, and the 3 unaffiliateds were interviewed and selected by the Board of Selectmen. That could be a possible model for how a Board of Education that's split 3-3-3 could work. That's all I had to say.
Okay, great.
I want to hear his story now.
Oh, that's right.
Dr.
Only can
Rinaldi.
tell the story.
Dr. Rinaldi, it's story time. Let's go.
Story time. When Mrs. Shanks was here, she gave you a little bit of insight into what happens when the town voters decide they're against the policy put forth by the first selectman and the town selectman. I mean the board of selectmen. About 25 years ago, the Belden School, which was a high school in town here, was used partially for the Board of Education, and it was used for other ancillary things. And the town hall was over by Eno Hall. The idea at that time was to make Belden School into the town hall. Great idea. Unfortunately, they wanted to spend something close to $4 million for a small rehab. Townspeople thought, that's a lot of money. That was 25 years. That's like spending 12 today. And they said, we don't like that. So we got up a petition. Now, to get a petition for a referendum in this town, you need 15% of the voters. It's not 1% like running for a board seat. So we got 15% of the people. And we had a referendum. And on the day of the referendum, there was only one polling place, it was Eno Hall. And they tore up the road. It's a state road. You need a permit. They didn't have a permit. And by the way, the referendum was 2-1 against spending that money. But we didn't meet the 15% total votes. We ran 57 votes short. But we had a referendum. It was successful to defeat the proposition. We thought it was too expensive, but they tore up the road. So we sued. And went to New Britain Court, Superior Court, and I attended those meetings there. And the final conclusion of the judge was, on the day that I went to court, by the way, I got served papers. The town sued me. The only time I've been sued in my life. I'm an interventional cardiologist. I do the most crazy procedures you can believe with a 3% mortality and stuff like that. And it's the only time I've ever got sued in my life. And I got sued, and I couldn't figure out why I got sued. I got sued because it was a countersuit, whatever they do. Well, anyways, the judge, he came out and he says, we understand what's going on here, he says, but I don't see a smoking gun. So that's a little bit about my story, about Mrs. Shanks giving you one side of the story, and there was more to that story. We never could prove why Mr. Rossi tore up the road, the state road, on election day without a permit. Okay, that's questionable. The judge sort of got it. About the Board of Education, I'm a two-party man. I believe in the two-party system, Democratic and Republican. The problem in this town is we have good people. We have excellent people, who run this town. Mary Glass, Ms. Miller, excellent people. We don't complain. And as Mr. Hinault said, he didn't see any clamor for town manager, foreign government. He's right. There's no clamor. However, what happened was we had a constitutional crisis because Mrs. Glassman, for whatever her reason was, she decided, we need more professionalization of this town. And she did it. And now we're here. Now, the question is, how should you present to the voters what you've decided tonight? Should we have any choice at all? Should it be town manager? Or should there be two lines, town manager, hybrid? Let people decide, okay? Because this vote, as I looked at it, I didn't think it was 7, or I thought it was more like 6-5 rather than 7-4. But I don't know, somebody changed their mind along the way here, but it looked to me like 6-5. 6-5 is not enough to change the town's government. It's working right now. Who we have in place right now, they do an excellent job. No one disagrees with. I heard nobody writing notes to the newspaper saying, "Oh, we need to change our government." Nobody's saying that, and nobody will say that. And I'm not even quite sure if you gave the public a choice how they would go. I'm not sure. In fact, I'm not sure they would go for town manager, to be quite honest, because they're pretty reliable. You've done such a good job over the years, and that they don't see a reason to change. I don't hear it. But anyways, if you really want to do a service to the town, give us a chance. Let us vote. Now, on the Board of Education, it's deceitful the way it's done. It took me 25 years to figure it out. And the only reason I figured it out, there was one guy that should not be on that board, I said, and he's there all the time. How do you get him off? So what I did is I walked up my street of 3 years ago, and I says, I'm going to run against that guy. So I got 53 signatures. I think, Mary, you signed my petition. But I only got 500 votes. I didn't publicize anything or anything like that. But I said, at least I'm going to try to do something. I'm not going to sit down and do nothing. So, as I explained to Mr. North, look, this is an easy solution. Republicans put 4 people up. Democrats put 4 people up. When it goes there, on the Republican line, vote for any 2. On the Democratic line, vote for any 2. I doubt if all the same people will be reelected. All we want is to get a couple of these guys off there. It's like the Supreme Court with 2 or 3 Justice Thomases on it. They're institutionalized. For whatever reason, I have no idea why they're on the board. Okay, I have no idea. I know, just maybe because they want their kids to show their kids they're participating or status or whatever it is. When you get on that Board of Education, there are a lot of tough decisions that have to be made. And I've seen some of those decisions in the past 10 years, which are lousy. And people heard those lousy decisions that I talked about. One's going to cost $5 million over the past 12 years. That wasn't even discussed. It went around him. He didn't like it, but he couldn't do anything about it. So what I'm saying is, give us the chance to vote what form of government we want. 6-5 is not good enough. It's not a 5-4 decision. Okay, it's not a 5-4 decision. I respect your opinion. Respect your opinion. But it's not good enough. We have referendum. I already spoke to the Board of Selectmen, and I made my views known there on Monday. I told them, whatever you got comes down from here, give us a choice. But you have to give us a choice, because the Board of Selectmen's not going to give us a choice. They're going to, whatever you send to them, they're going to, that's it. Or they may put it up for a referendum, they may not. But I'm saying, we have a good form of government right now. That may be a better form. I don't know. But give us a choice. And when it comes to the Board of Education, come on, you guys can work it out. We're not talking about we need a bunch of independents on that board. We're saying we want new people occasionally, not term limits. But we don't want 2 people who go to those meetings and are like deaf, dumb, and blind. They stand there and they don't say anything. And then you hire a guy who monopolizes the whole meeting. Okay? When we have people like that on that board, we can vote those guys off. We can't now. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, anything else? We're going to set to adjourn. Somebody want to make a motion?
Move to adjourn.
I'll second.
And a second. All those in favor? Boom, we're done. Thank you.
Is that
Thank you all.
7-4 or was that?
6:05, we made it. Once.
Some of us want to stay.
I don't
Keep
know why
talking.
mine makes this four, because I think it's a good idea.
There was 1, 2, 3.
It's
We got it.
8:03.
No, 7-4.
I thought it was 8.